Simplified.
You are listening to Boston Public Radio. We are live at the Boston Public Library. I am Jim Browdy. Jared Bowen is sitting in for Marjorie Egan, who is on vacation but shall return on Monday. Hello, Jared. How are you?
Hello, Jim. I'm well.
Now, how did I know that you were filling in for Marjorie today? Do you have any idea what the clue was?
Does it have anything to do with food?
It does, and what would that be?
That the Spicy Jared sandwich is back here
yes,
at the Boston
Yes, it is back
Public
at the
Library.
Newsfeed Cafe. You want to tell people what the Spicy Jared is, please?
Well, it's a very gorgeous rendition of the buffalo chicken sandwich. By the way, it took President Lee Pelton to get this sandwich back here.
That's true, from the Boston Foundation, yeah. And what is it again? It's a variation on what?
The buffalo chicken sandwich.
Yeah, it's right next to the gym, by the way, for whatever that's worth. So good to have you, Jared. And as I say, Marjorie will return on Monday, and we are streaming if you are not wise enough to be here at the Boston Public Library. And by the way, thank you all for coming. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. So I'm sure you read yesterday, state lawmakers proposed a one-time tax rebate of $250 for individuals to millions of people throughout the Commonwealth. The rebates would go to people making less than $100,000 a year, more for married couples. And get this, they have to make more than $38,000. And I'll do the reverse for you. If you make less than $38,000, how much do you get, Jared?
Zero.
You get nothing. When asked about this $38,000 floor, the House Speaker, Ron Mariano, said it had to do with the fact that low-income earners in the state already received an extra $500 in the state's COVID recovery package sometime in the spring. The rebates would go into effect in October if bills pass both legislative branches before people on Beacon Hill go on a 6-month vacation, and obviously the governor's got to sign that too. So we want to know your thoughts on this proposed rebate. Would $250, $500 for a couple, up to $150,000 of income, would it make a difference in your life with rising inflation, gas prices, etc.? Or would you rather see all that money, it's going to cost roughly $500 million, put together and dedicated to something that would benefit everybody? Improvements at the T, better and more affordable and accessible childcare. Give us a buzz or text us at 877-301-8970. Again, 877-301-8970. And you can tweet us at BOS Public Radio. So what are your thoughts, Jared Bowen?
Well, yeah, I think it's a nice psychological boost, perhaps. I mean, this comes out of the fact that the state has I think, as you mentioned, a $3.6 billion surplus. This is literally huge because we've not had this before. And so to send this out is, I guess, good, but I don't know how far it goes. It certainly helps. You can't leave the supermarket now without having a huge chunk of that $250 taken away. But how it excludes those making less than $38,000, accommodating apparently for the fact that they already got the $500 check a while ago, it just doesn't make any sense. The people most in need.
Well, that's exactly right. And if they had said we're going to have it from $38,000 to $100,000, as absurd as it be, and they didn't explain why, you might fall for it. But the argument, as you say, that they already got something in the spring. A family or an individual making less than $38,000 got a $500 check 5 months ago. And as a result, they don't need the $500? So that's one flaw. And two, again, I think it's a nice gesture. And this is what I'm about to say does not mean I don't understand that people are having a lot of financial problems because of the prices of everything. So, in fact, can I tell you one thing for a second? Maybe this is selfish, and I'll get trashed for it again. I like watermelon a lot.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, a little triangle, they call triangles a little slice of watermelon, like at Whole Foods, is maybe $3.50. You know what it was yesterday?
No.
Same size, $8.90. So having said that, I'm not going to be income eligible for this thing anyway, so take me out of this mix. It seems to me it's like one of those gimmicks kind of thing. That's what's going to aggravate. I know a lot of people who need the money. It seems to me there are a lot, like the T. We're going to talk to our transportation people at 12:30 or something today. The T is a mess. Would the average person rather get a check for $250 or see some serious additional money poured into the T to make sure it's a little less dysfunctional? I don't know what the answer is, but that's why we're asking for your thoughts. At 877-301-8970. 8970. You know what this seems like to me? We have to show the public that we understand that they have problems, and we can't figure out anything more complicated to do that might be more, I'm serious, more beneficiary. I mean, I was a city councilor for a term. I understand gimmickry, believe me. And it's sort of like, well, let's do this, because we have, as you say, billions of extra dollars. And by the way, they're saying it doesn't preclude them from doing some of Governor Baker's permanent tax cuts. The governor's going to be with us a week on July 21st. We'll talk to him about that too. That's the deal. 877-301-8970 is our number, and you can text us and call us at the same sort of thing. By the way, just for those who are getting nervous about the ceilings, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, is it's $100,000 for an individual, $150,000 for a married couple. That's the ceiling. Yep. And it goes from $250 for an individual to $500 for that couple. And exactly, again, as you say, under $38,000 for an individual, they get absolutely nothing, which is just stunning, is just absolutely stunning. I assume they'll fix that before this thing goes through.
I would think so. I am very curious. And it's been a while since I've been so eager to hear what our callers, I'm always interested, of course, but so eager to hear, because this, I mean, it clearly resonated with you and with me, but it doesn't make sense. And they, of course, are weighing this against other gimmicks, as you call it, like suspending the gas tax and other things like that.
Well, they did. In all fairness, they said no
universal.
to that. Even though their fellow Democrat, Joe Biden, was the one that urged state legislatures to suspend the gas tax, the overwhelmingly Democratic legislature, I think to their credit, said that doesn't make sense, because it's, what's that expression, robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Right.
Because it takes money out of, important things that fund highways and all that sort of thing. 877-301-8970. I'm giving myself a headache. Christine, you're in Cape Cod, and you happen to be first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi, Christine.
Hi, Jim. Hi, I love you guys. I listen to you all the time.
What do you think of Jared? Not that much? What do you think?
I love Jared, too.
Whatever. Okay.
And I love Marjorie.
Yeah, she's okay.
Vacation.
I don't know if she's coming back. Go ahead.
I'm actually on vacation right now, too. So, yes, I am a Cape Cod resident. I live in Bourne, and it is an insult to think that $250 is going to do anything in my life. I was just at Walmart and spent over $250 to try to make baklava for my son's birthday with my Albanian mother-in-law.
Wow.
So they should take all of that money and do something sensible with it, like fix the Bourne and Sagamore bridges, reroute the traffic down here so that it doesn't take locals over 2 hours to go 13 miles. It's totally insane. I had no idea we were even going to get $250 back, but hearing you say that just irritates me when I live where I live.
Well, by the way, Christine, you said fix or repair, use some verb for the two bridges. Theoretically, they're being replaced. Is that not the case? They're going to be replaced.
When are they going to replace them?
I think, how old are your kids?
Some of that money. My son is 7.
When his grandson is born is when that's the target date. Christine, enjoy your vacation, and thank you for the call. Here on text, there are two different opinions. Here's Benjamin in Brighton. Sending out free money to people it's not free, but sending out free money to people is a great way to fight inflation. I'm going to spend it on goods right away. He's obviously in favor. The next texter, Jared, crushed it. It's a psychological boost, but in this economy won't help much. Let's save it and dedicate it all to the tea so that people can safely get to work to make money. Oh, that's Colin. I'm sorry, in East Boston. He did sign it. So there is it's really hard to resist. I mean, when you're suffering financially, I know this is like so obvious. It's ridiculous. It's hard to say no to almost anything, even if it's not enough money. As the head of the Mass Budget and Policy Center said, people are worried about their rent, and this doesn't even cover a significant chunk of people's rent. And so one might argue, if you're going to do this, maybe make it more significant than $250, which seems performative, to use the word of the day, but that's what they proposed.
Well, of course, you're also measuring this against the federal stimulus checks, which were considerably more, so this doesn't seem like as much. And of course, when the federal checks came, it took you a lot further than these checks will take.
Well, they're
anyone.
Also long gone. I mean, gone like in a nanosecond.
But I'm just saying, if you compare, the federal government gave us this much, and it helped us this much, but where's $250 going to get us? But on the other hand, I can see people thinking that they can spend their money more wisely than the state might.
So you're pretty much coming down firmly on both sides.
I'm not,
but
I'm trying to see the other point of view.
Jack in Concord, you're on Boston Public Radio with Jared Bowen and me, Jim Browdy, and we're at the library. Hey there.
Hey.
Hi.
I've tried calling before. I've never gotten through. This is cool.
Well, glad you did.
Yeah, I work in Concord, but I live in Fitchburg, and $500 would actually make a big difference in my life right now, is because I have to drive for work.
Okay.
And I feel like the Central and Western Mass crowd isn't going to benefit from a lot of the public infrastructure stuff like the T. So like $500 isn't a lot of money for a couple, but it's more than nothing. I don't know.
Well, by the way, I think you do know. I think the more than nothing is a pretty compelling argument. I think what you're basically saying, even if it isn't what I need, it'll help, and or even if it won't fill the need. And I think that's, if I had to bet, if there was a poll, I would guess that'd be the dominant position. Jack, thank you so much for your call. We appreciate it. You know what would have been nice, by the way? You know, I read in the Globe this morning, we're one of only 3 states, what a shock, that has not released its annual budget yet. We're late, as always. It would have been great if this came out at the same time that the budget came out, so that leaders could stand up and say, at the same time that we're giving you, we admit, a small, but we hope helpful amount of money, we are also investing X amount of dollars in childcare. We're investing Y amount of dollars in the T. And, you know,
or how about the still hard hits arts sector, which I'm waiting to see what that budget is.
Is there significant money for arts?
Not as much as they always call for.
You know, one of the things, by the way, in terms of recurring things, which is what Governor Baker wants, which is to these 4 permanent tax cuts affecting renters, and he would argue seniors, meaning our estate tax is arguably not terribly competitive. It starts at a much lower rate than other states do, and a few other things that he would do. This surplus we have, both the federal money and the surplus in the budget, are not recurring kinds of things. So I would guess what the legislators on Beacon Hill would say about this one-time deal is this is coming out of non-recurring funds. I don't mean to give people a headache, so that makes sense kind of thing. We're not going to have budget surpluses every year. We're probably never going to get a multi-billion-dollar check from the federal government again, as we did around infrastructure and other stuff. Let's go to Cambridge, where Daniel is on the phone. Daniel, thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, guys. Huge fan, first-time caller.
Thank you for both things. Welcome.
The worry that I have is the Fed is saying we have inflation that's driven by all this money in the economy, like this demand-side inflation. So if we give people more money, doesn't that just make the problem worse? Shouldn't we use that money to focus on making things cheaper instead?
Boy, that's a really interesting perspective. I mean, I think every economist agrees that giving a lot of money and having people spend it, while one side, as the caller right before you, Daniel, said, I need it to cover my expenses. The other side, it will have some impact on inflation. But a guy who I trust in this, John Gruber, the economist from MIT, with us a couple of days ago, said even the federal stimulus money, which was, as Jared said, much larger by comparison, had only a modest impact on inflation. But your perspective is interesting. It's about why not use it to make things more affordable. You may know, we're going to talk to the transportation people at 12:30, in this bill that relates to the T, the one thing that was left out of it was a proposal to at least do a pilot on low-income or free fares around the state. So they rejected your advice, at least on one front, Daniel, but it's an interesting perspective. Thank you for calling. 877-301-8970. Sophia in Cambridge. Why isn't this money being funneled directly into schools along with free lunch programs? Christine on Twitter. I'm against this $250 payout and would rather see the money spent in ways that will truly benefit the state, or give it to the lowest earners, or add it to Medicaid. The list goes on and on. Marcelo Garcia from the Globe yesterday talked about a huge hole in Medicaid funding as relates to undocumented kids and their basic needs. That would only be $100 million. This is $500 million. I think she would argue it's probably far better spent there.
Well, as I started the segment by talking about the psychological boost it's giving people, but again, you go to these low-income earners who are not going to receive the check. What message does it send to them that everybody else is going to get this check, and you're struggling more than ever? Again, we're talking about things that have drastically changed just in the last few months. How hard it is for people to make the rent, how hard it is for people to just get food on the table for the $8 slice of watermelon.
Can you? Well, I didn't buy it, by the way. But you know, getting back to that thing that you're focusing on, what the Speaker of the House said yesterday. Can you imagine a person making 30 grand? Here's what he says, and says the reason you're not included in this $250 check thing, which isn't much anyway, is because you already got a check. What was it, March, I think it was, or April? 4 months ago or 3 months ago, you got a check for $250. It was $500, I think, from the state, and that should be enough. I mean, how insensitive, how tin-eared is that it's pretty incredible. 877-301-8097. Let's go to Framingham where Nancy's on the phone. Nancy, thank you for calling. Hi.
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 I have a lot of questions and issues about this. Inflation is out of control, and I anticipate it's going to be really out of control for the rest of the year. I'm a 77 disabled woman. I get Social Security, and it's not much, believe me. Annually, last year it was not under $9,000. I get a stipend, which I have doubled over the last 2 years, and I'm responsible for my own food, clothing, and supplies like toilet paper, paper towels, soap, shampoo, things like that. And it's tough. It's really, really tough because I've always admired myself for my own budgeting with limited income, but these days it's not sustainable.
And your position is, I assume, Nancy, is why am I, of all people, being excluded from the, albeit modest, benefit of this? You could really use it, right?
$1,000 income.
Nancy, thank you for the call. I hope legislators hear Nancy, for what you say, $9,000 from Social Security or some such thing?
I think so. Very small, not enough.
And she got a check in the spring, they say, so there's no need to write her another one.
All right, we are talking about the proposed one-time $250 tax rebate. That conversation continues with your
Next time on The World, one tennis star not playing at Wimbledon this week is Peng Shuai. Last year in China, she accused a former high-ranking politician of sexual assault. Then she disappeared for weeks. So what's happening with Peng Shuai now?
I think we know the answer in the sense that she's not free.
Freedom for Peng Shuai, an ongoing concern for the world of tennis. Her story on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Dana-Farber Brigham Cancer Center, where your team specializes in your type of cancer. You and Dana-Farber Brigham Cancer Center can take the first step together at youhaveus.org. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Be revolutionary. UMass is the Commonwealth's flagship public research university and committed to the relentless pursuit of progress. Learn more at umass.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Jared Bowen sitting in for Marjorie, who returns on Monday. We're live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're talking about the story that broke yesterday that legislative leaders are proposing $250 for an individual who makes more than $38,000 and less than $100,000, a little bit more, $500 and a little bit more income thresholds for married couples. We're asking if you think it's a wise expenditure of $500 million. Should it be spent as a whole on something else? How do you feel about the fact that people under 38 grand, like Nancy, the 77-year-old on Social Security who called a minute ago, will not be benefiting, I guess because the speaker said she already got hers, whatever that means, in the spring? 877-301-8970. Jim and Jared is a citizen, this is a text, of the south coast of Massachusetts. You should know that fixing the T does not affect me. I understand it's a problem for those who use the T, but many citizens of Massachusetts do not. Well, you didn't sign that, so my apologies, but South Coast Rail, that affects you. They've been talking about that for a couple of centuries here, and as far as I know, it hasn't been built yet. And one of the issues is funding. Even though people are committed to it, that's $500 million that could go to that. I mean, it can't go to everything, but it could go to something other than $250 checks, even though obviously some of our callers and a ton of our texters, Jared, want the money.
Well, it might not affect people directly who don't use the T, but this is also about climate change. The more we can put into public transportation and make this more readily available, the more cars we can take off the road and change the issues involving the climate that the cars are, the emissions that cars are producing.
A compromise could be also to subsidize the cost of watermelon. Because that is another $8 and some cents for a little tiny triangle of watermelon.
And we should say that this is a trial balloon, I feel like, in which we're all clearly shooting down with our slingshots right now.
The 250, 500?
Yeah, because it still has to be passed.
It is
by
not
the
a trial balloon. You think they're going to offer it and then pull it back?
Well, no. I think they may enhance it or revisit it, but this doesn't get fully signed off on until the governor does it by the end of the month.
Right. And by the way, for those who, I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, but I will get lost in the weeds for a second. The reason they have to pass this by the end of the month is because the legislators, who you pay, by the way, in an election year, leave for the year at the end of July. They're off August, September, October, November, December. And what they will say to you, if you confront them about that, is they're working back in the district. And by the way, the real reason is they have re-election campaigns, except most of them don't have re-election campaigns because almost nobody runs against anybody in Massachusetts. So the notion that they take off for 5 months, to me, is frankly disgraceful. Sally in Lexington, what's your deal?
Hey, Sally.
Hi, I want to thank you, Jared, for bringing up climate change. I think it is egregious that the money is being spent in any way other than electrifying our heating, our cooling. It can be done, except for a lack of will by the legislature. Thank you for mentioning that, Jared. I'm a first-time caller, and I love the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your first call, Sally, and thanks for your... did you steal her idea from her, or was that your own idea?
It was my own idea. Thank you very much. I know
so.
It is a Friday, and you don't think I'm equipped.
I don't think so. I didn't say you weren't equipped. You have your own sandwich. Is anybody here eating this spicy Jared, by the way, yet? Not one person at the library has had the spicy Jared.
It's not even lunchtime yet.
And by the way, it's this little... Describe what it is again. I think they're interested.
It's buffalo chicken with some blue cheese, lettuce, a beautiful bun.
Spicy Jared. Now, let me tell you, I know him. He is a spicy Jared. Trust me. I'm just telling you. Draw your own conclusions.
I thought we were going to keep those things off here.
Well, you got to be honest with the listeners. Let's go to... Where do you want to go, actually?
Let's go to Jonathan in Waltham. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan. Hello.
Thanks so much for letting me share some thoughts.
Good.
I think what we have is a crisis of imagination. We share a lot in common in our current climate with the Great Depression. I mean, back then they had a pandemic, they had an economic downpour, and also they had war. And I think we just need to reinvest in our economy. This is a drop in the bucket. We need to get creative. Use as an example, Governor Gavin Newsom is about to start manufacturing in California.
Insulin,
thank you.
Yep, it's great.
So we need to get creative. We need to create jobs. We need to reinvest back into the Massachusetts taxpayers and not just pretend that $250 is going to somehow uplift everyone.
Jonathan, you're a genius, and I mean that. That was great, and I had totally forgotten about this thing that's happening out in California. By the way, the vast majority of Republicans in the House voted the other day against cutting the cost of insulin. And speaking of cutting the cost, thanks for the call, Jonathan. Here's a quiz for you. Who was the person responsible for raising the cost of the EpiPen somewhere in the neighborhood of 500% a few years ago? And who is she the daughter of? You can answer either or both questions. Who's that?
I'm blanking on this.
Okay, I don't know her name, but she runs the company, and she is the daughter of Joe Manchin. Thank you very much.
Nice.
Point being, it runs in the family.
Yep.
Where do you want to go next?
Well, and let's just point out, to Jonathan's point, we're dealing with $5.9 billion here. So there's a lot of great creative ways that this money could go toward helping.
But talk about outside the box. I mean, all you and I have talked about is investing more in that which is what Gavin Newsom, who is clearly running for president, which is fine with me, whatever the motivation is totally thinking outside the box. When insulin is unaffordable, then one of the ways to do it is doing what he's doing, manufacture it in your home state.
Let's go to Joanne in Hubbardston.
Hello, Joanne.
Hi. This is about the gas tax rebate.
Yeah.
And how be on SSI, SSID.
Yeah.
We should get like $1,000 a month, and we're not even included the tax, the rebate.
Joanne, they're talking about $250 once. Do you think they're about to be sending checks for $1,000 a month to the people of Massachusetts, even if it is deserved? I don't think so. Do you?
No, I don't. But I do believe that Governor Baker's idea about having the gas tax be held was the better idea.
You mean reducing the tax or eliminating the state tax on the gas tax?
You said for a few months at least?
Yeah, he was talking about a few months, but unfortunately, Joanne, it is not going to happen.
Because Joanne, I'm sure you have clear ideas of where that money could go immediately in your situation. I think she's off the call.
I think I hung up on her unintentionally. By the way, this is a stunningly equal split. By the way, I'm looking at these texts as Joanne was speaking. It is really, and there are tons of them, it's like a 50-50 proposition. Because you can understand being pulled in both directions. Intellectually, you may say it'd probably be far better to spend $500 million, which is what the cost of this program is, to things that I care about that are inadequately funded. But the flip side is, as a couple of callers have made clear, they could use the $250, or if married, the $500. We have time for one more. Neil in Medway, it would be you. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Neil.
Hello, Jim. Hi. How's it going?
Hi. Say hi to Jared, too, because he feels bad. Hi.
Hi, Jared.
Hi, Jared.
Hi, Neil.
What's up?
I just want to call because I'm amazed that, so the cap is, $38,000 to $100,000?
Yeah, that's the eligibility hole. $38,000 to $100,000.
There's a massive difference between someone making $38,000 and $100,000. And I think that maybe having some sort of scale going from that number, let alone the whole below 38. I mean, these people need a lot of help. It's just strange to me that you would have this proposal and you're just putting the same size Band-Aid on every single type of wound.
But I hope you're not arguing that the higher your income is, the more you should get, because I meant to say before, but I forgot. I would argue the lower your income, the more you should get, because the need is greater, including under the $38,000. If anything, it should begin to phase out rather than just be eliminated at the $100,000 level. Do you agree with that, Neil?
That's exactly what I'm
Okay.
thinking. Yeah.
My apologies. Neil, thank you for your call.
That's the more you should get.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for calling in.
Well, thank you to everyone who called and texted just now. Next, we will check in with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner on what President Biden can and could do to protect abortion in America and other ramifications stemming from recent Supreme Court decisions. That's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
From the GBH Newsroom,
I'm Callie Crossley, host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley. The best stories come from conversations with people outside of your own bubble. I don't think that any of us in the news and information business can function very well if we are only doing our own. This is what I think is important. You can never run out of stories if you are keeping up a continuing community conversation.
Part of your community. GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Newport Mansions, presenting Anything You Want, a closer look at treasures from Newport's Gilded Age. On view now at Rosecliff and included with admission. Learn more at newportmansions.org. And Lexus Broadway in Boston, presenting Wicked, returning to the Citizens Bank Opera House June 8th through July 24th. Ticket information and availability online at lexusbroadwayinboston.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor here at GBH, sitting in for Marjorie. Marjorie's back from vacation on Monday. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Right now, at roughly this minute, I don't know if it's actually happening yet, the President will be addressing the nation, explaining steps that he will be taking to protect abortion by executive action in the wake of the overturning of Roe in the Dobbs decision a week or so ago. Joining us now with thoughts on that and a host of other issues pertaining to the nation's highest court, we're joined now by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. The reason I'm laughing, she's now at Harvard, by the way. The reason I'm laughing is because judges, Judge Gertner, ordinarily sit above the people they're talking to. You look like you're sitting in a hole here at the Boston Public Library. Nevertheless, we are thrilled to have you.
This will have to change.
This will have to change.
This will have to change.
Good to see you, Judge.
Well, we could flip the script. We're just your court officers standing next to you, flanking you. Well, let me start by asking you about the Supreme Court. You were part of a commission that was studying the Supreme Court for change, looking at things like term limits. Should the court be expanded? Should there be more transparency within the court? I know you came out of that. There was not a lot of momentum for change. What do you see happening now?
I think we're beginning to see that because to some degree, really, this was a rogue court. I think the minute after the Dobbs decision, I was on this program and I said it was a coup. It was essentially a legal coup. In a sense, this court was doing what it wanted to do because they could. And it was almost as if there was a sort of flavor of the month. Justice Thomas had been wanting to overturn gun regulations. Justice Alito has been wanting to overturn Roe v. Wade for the longest time. Justice Gorsuch wanted a narrow administrative state, which was in the EPA case. And it's like they all had, because there are 6 of them, they could do whatever they want. Precedents come crashing down. Understandings of the past 50 years and even more, they were ignoring. And the problem is that because of the packed court that McConnell has effected, you add to that the voting rights limitations that the Republicans are seeking, and a court that is enabling them. Witness the North Carolina case that's coming up. We'll talk about. Essentially, this configuration of the Supreme Court will be baked in for generations. And that never happened before.
But Judge Gertner, you were an advocate. You and Larry Traub, your buddy, came out of this commission, we've discussed this before, saying expansion of the court, which has been done, I think, 9 times in our history by Congress, doesn't require a constitutional amendment, is a good idea. Even the President of the United States, who has railed against the behavior of this court, opposes that reform. So it's almost like fantasy land right now in answer to the question Jared talked to you about momentum. Is it not, or is momentum actually being gained somewhere?
Well, there are more and more people talking about expanding the court because more and more people recognize that having this hyper-conservative majority baked in for generations, the way they're doing it, as someone wrote about, will sort of have us sort of go, careen back into the 1930s. With respect to women's rights, I believe it's even earlier than that. I think that there's more momentum. Whether or not that momentum will go anywhere without Biden's support is another question.
Is there anything else on the table that does pass the current political laugh test? I don't mean that disrespectfully in terms of the expansion. I mean it. That has a greater likelihood of convincing, for example, a mansion and a cinema, 2 senators, that maybe there should be a filibuster carve out to make this change. Is there a more modest change that would make a difference?
Well, there's no, the filibuster carve-out is essential both for abortion to be able to enshrine abortion rights nationally, but filibuster carve-out would be necessary to expand the court. In other words, you could say, as they have said with Supreme Court nominees, that with respect to the Supreme Court, all you needed was a 50 vote, right? So they certainly could do that. So they'd have to, you're right, they'd have to cut back, they'd have to limit the filibuster, and then we'd have to expand the court. But there are more people talking about it. I don't know whether this momentum will go anywhere until Biden signs on. But Biden needs to sign on, full stop. Otherwise, we are locked into this really never world. I keep on reading about the implications of the Dobbs decision, on the women had the wanted pregnancy, but the miscarriage where the doctor waits until the fetus dies in order to intervene. I mean, it is lunacy where we are. Just lunacy.
From your time on the commission, did you get a sense of the president decide and seeing where and when he decides to step in on this, whether something is most in reach, whether it actually is expanding the court, or whether it's something like term limits, which people might find more palatable?
The problem with term limits, which would be palatable and which also would make our court, like courts all across the Western world, really, that all have term limits, that requires a constitutional amendment. I mean, to some degree, whereas expanding the court does not require a constitutional amendment, and I think that's why people were focused on it. But something needs to be done. Otherwise, we are, concretizing these bizarre decisions, and I can't tell you how bizarre they are.
By the way, for whatever it's worth, for people not paying attention, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett are all in their young 50s.
Right.
Which means, and what did Stephen Breyer retired at 80-something, which means, if in all likelihood, 3 more decades they could be serving on the Supreme Court.
Which makes their haste to sort of undo the precedent that they have this term really remarkable. You'd think, I've written about Ginsburg, and I've been on this program talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was, as some would describe her, a judicial restraint liberal. She believed in incrementalism, that you make change slowly. The 3 cases that I talked about, the gun case, the abortion case, the EPA case, the court went out of its way to decide something that they didn't have to decide. And that's an agenda.
Well, I would argue they went even further. We've had this discussion before, but for people who haven't heard it, the signs, at least to me, about what the future holds. In the abortion case, Thomas comes right out and says we should look at contraception cases, we should look at same-sex marriage. Most observers think that the EPA case was the foot in the door, basically saying that federal regulatory agencies can't regulate, that only Congress can make these decisions, which would mean which would mean a standstill.
That's right.
Total gridlock. And you subscribe to that notion that is the direction in which they're going, yes?
Well, Gorsuch in particular believes that there are two problems, that an administrative agency can't make regulations unless Congress is absolutely specific about the scope of that. Congress is rarely specific, right? Congress is a product of compromise. You had an expert agency to give the specific details. In addition, Gorsuch believes that there are certain areas in which the regulation is not appropriate at all. And so by ceding to Congress, we've essentially brought the economy to a standstill.
And they know that they're doing this at a time that the Congress is as dysfunctional as it's probably been in our lifetimes. We're talking to Nancy Gertner, former federal district court judge.
And maybe this falls in the category of civics lesson that I should have had, but as we start to anticipate next summer, basically the cases the court will take up over the next year, what do we need to be looking for, and how do we pay attention to that process of what the court decides to take up?
All you need is 4 justices to take on a case, right? And so you already have the conservative supermajority baked in. They can take whatever case they want. They've taken the North Carolina case.
Yeah, could you explain that in English? We were going to do it later, but since you brought it up, let's do it, yeah.
In English, okay. North Carolina passed a statute that would essentially enable the legislature to define what the electoral requirements are. And what's going up to the Supreme Court is whether the state legislature, can fully define electoral requirements, as opposed to the state legislature then being reviewed by a state constitutional court, by a state court. And what we've seen is Trump's attempted coup, was to try to get each of the state legislatures to say, here's the electors, not the ones that the majority vote suggested, but here are some electors that we're picking out of thin air. And since all of the swing states have Republican legislatures, if it's true that the legislature is the final authority, not reviewed by a court, we're all in trouble. I mean, they could pick Trump electors even when Biden wins. So in a sense, the North Carolina case is completing the coup that Trump tried.
I mean, they essentially could. I mean, I hope people don't think this is hyperbole, because I've read a lot about this too. If the Supreme Court were to sign off on what the Republican legislature in North Carolina wants, as you say, if people in a state of North Carolina or one of these other states vote for John Doe and they want Jane Doe to be the winner, she becomes the winner.
Right.
They have unilateral 100% authority.
200 again, this is a court that is, I mean, the notion that they took this case legitimizes it already. 200 years. It's clear that the electors were the people who represented the majority vote in any given state. And if they did something different, if they picked Jane Doe, the state constitutional court, their high court would say, this is inconsistent with our rules. This is saying that the state legislature has the last word. The state legislature has the last word, then the Republicans can do whatever they want. And that then feeds into we were talking about before, about the Supreme Court. We then have this minority government capable of appointing new justices for the foreseeable future.
Talking to Nancy Gertner.
And just to circle back to what I was saying, so then you see them scanning, pulling the cases up, going back to what Clarence Thomas wrote about, looking for same-sex marriage cases that they can consider over the year. So this is what they'll spend the next year doing.
And Clarence Thomas's concurrence was essentially an invitation to raise those cases. You're saying, come on in. We're prepared to look again at same-sex marriage. Griswold was birth control for married couples. We're prepared to look at all of them, because the only thing that matters in the Constitution is what those 19th century and 18th century white slave-owning males decided to put in the Constitution. And if they mentioned guns, well, then that right is higher than everyone else's. It's an elevated right. They didn't mention women. We didn't exist to them, either in the 18th century or the 19th century. So it's really sort of ossifying attitudes from, that's 200 years old. It's preposterous. It's preposterous, and I might add, we're the laughing stock of high courts around the world.
We're talking to Nancy Gertner. Can we talk about abortion for a couple of minutes? As I said when I introduced you, Judge Gertner, the president, as we speak, will get, no Biden yet, they're saying he's often quite late for his appointed pronouncements, is by executive order doing a handful of things on the abortion front. Some people think heartfelt, which I'm assuming it is. Some think, because he's taken so much criticism from fellow Democrats about inaction, slowness and inaction. He's doing something directing Health and Human Services, from what we understand, to protect the right of women to get these medical abortions, to get the pills, even though it doesn't spell out how, which concerns people. Their HHS supposedly going to report back in 30 days. And another thing, which is a nice idea, not a nice idea, it's an excellent idea, for women who are at the wrong end of a state prosecutors on a whole variety of things, he's saying the federal government should work to get lawyers available to these people. Once again, filling in no blanks as to how that happens. Talk a little bit about what you think about we believe Joe Biden is doing on the abortion front this morning, Judge Gertner.
Medical abortion, the pill, has the promise of completely changing this picture. I won't want to say undoing the harm in the states that have prohibited abortion, but certainly changing the picture. Because if someone from Tennessee can write to a Boston pharmacy and get the pills in the mail, they get the pills in the mail.
So it isn't that it would be legal, it'd just be essentially unenforceable as a violation of the state's laws.
That's right. And so, I mean, I don't quite understand how the states plan to keep people from doing that. That then relates to privacy issues. If you recall, one of the things that Biden wants to do is to keep, when someone is inquiring of their doctor to get abortion, to try to protect, as they should, that inquiry. So that would be an end run around sending away for the pills. But bear in mind, the medical abortion pills have been approved by the FDA. Yeah. There's a real question here whether a state can say, you know, those pills that you've approved, sorry, they're not viable here. The second...
By the way, just staying on that,
yeah.
If Joe Biden, in my opinion, I'm not an expert in this area, wanted to go another yard and make those pills more available and less discoverable, a lot of people believe the FDA should approve them for over-the-counter sale.
That's right.
Which would remove the doctor from that equation, which would be of great value.
Which would make an enormous difference.
Yeah.
It would make an enormous difference. It doesn't mean that the states that are restricting abortion there are still issues of wanted pregnancies with a miscarriage and
of course.
All of that, but certainly in terms of access to abortion. The second thing that Biden will be talking about, which I'm doing part of, is to try to organize people to represent anybody who is charged with an illegal abortion, aiding and abetting abortion, or interstate travel to get an abortion. I, for one, will go anywhere in the country to represent anyone charged with any of that. And I think that there are numbers of us who are doing that as well, and coming up with a list, numbers of organizations that are coming up with a list of lawyers who frankly will say, we will represent you, and we will clot their courts with representation if they go after these women.
That's fabulous. So is this an organized thing that's actually percolating up kind of thing?
Yes. I mean, the various organizations are trying to get together to come up with this list. But I mean, I think, there is the long-term plan here, and then there's a short-term plan, and we have to be able to help women who are suffering. We have to deal with doctors, and I'm supposedly retired. Of course, that's not remotely true, but I'm prepared to go.
So just so I'm clear, this is great. So once this thing were to happen, not just you as an individual, but you and many other lawyers willing to do this, somebody who is in legal trouble or fears that she may be in legal trouble, or he, if it's the doctor doing this, calls a number, for example, and he or she is connected to a lawyer like you, who will go represent them to, I assume, for free.
Oh, yeah, right. There's no question. I mean, it's sort of, when you think about it, it's one of my law clerks organized something like this in the Bronx when they were stop and frisk bad searches of African American men. He went to the law firms in New York, and he said, you have younger lawyers who have never been in court. Give them to me, and we'll represent everyone who has been illegally stopped. And what happened was the stops stopped because the courts couldn't possibly handle them. That's what we're hoping for here.
Well, speaking of where pregnant women can go to safely receive treatment, there's been also a call that the White House seems to have jettisoned for using federal lands for this purpose. Our own Elizabeth Warren, of course, has talked about this. Is that too cumbersome? What are the complications there?
The complication is long ago, people don't realize that Roe v. Wade was being cut back on almost the instant that it was decided. And one thing was that federal funds can't be used for abortion. There's a statute that would have to be appealed. It was called the Hyde Amendment. Yeah, and so the question is, to the extent that abortions on federal lands implicate federal funding, that would be a problem. But, my feeling is, as I said, if you believe as I do that this is just a complete reversal of everything we have ever believed in, I think that the federal government should pull out all stops. So that may be complicated, but I mean, because of the funding issue. But we have to figure out some way to be able to respond.
But I'm not alone in this. This, in fact, is not an original thought. The federal government's not doing it because the Biden administration believes it's illegal. And as many critics say, when they say this is like an existential issue, this abortion issue, just do it. And then if a Judge Gertner knocks it down, so be it. And I said this, I think, yesterday. Well, a lot of people then say, well, that's not how Joe Biden operates. I remember Joe Biden saying, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I would love to extend the eviction moratorium, but I can't do it because it's illegal. And then what happened? His own CDC did it. They lost in court, but he decided to go for it. And it seems to me, this is a political, not a well, it's a political and a legal question. You basically decide what can you do to protect reproductive freedom. You propose a panoply of things, and the worst that happens is they're struck down, and you go back and you figure out another bunch of things, if for no other reason than to gin up the forces, even if you don't. Do you not agree?
No, I agree with you. Now, you can't sort of, when you're the chief law enforcement officer of the, the chief, not law enforcement, the chief officer of the United States. When you're the president, right. When you're the president, you can't propose something that is blatantly illegal unless you're former President Trump. You can't sort of say, oh, screw the, the limitation on federal funding of abortions, I will go ahead and fund abortions. But clearly there's play in the joint, as you're suggesting. And there are lots of things that he could have done. What would be at the top of that list if you were advising him?
Well,
one would be sort of making medical abortions over the counter, medical abortions. But I can tell you that one thing that happened, which was stunning to me, my kids are in 34 and 36 and 50. And when the response to the Dobbs decision, to the abortion decision, was a fundraising letter from the Democrats to vote for them in November, they went crazy. They said that can't be the response. That's simply not adequate, and I think that that's right.
Well, Judge Gertner, from your lips to whatever. One more thing, because I'm really excited about this lawyer thing. This is, I assume there'll be an announcement at some point?
Yes, there are numbers of organizations that have lists that are working to coordinate, to come up with a list of women and male lawyers and to be able to represent people that these laws are affecting wherever it happens. Wherever it happens.
And by the way, if there are mega rich people listening, and I assume there are, they should fund this effort too, because there are a lot of lawyers who are well-intended who would love to do it, who probably, no, I'm serious, who probably can't afford.
1-800-GERTNER. I don't know, I'm making that up.
Exactly. Thank you, guys. So call 1-800-GERTNER, and she will be answering the phone herself in her car back to wherever. Nancy Gertner, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
See you.
Thank you so much for being here. Retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, receiving great applause here at the library, is a senior lecturer at the Harvard Law School. She's also a BPR contributor. Coming up, we'll continue the conversation we had earlier in the show with you about those $250 rebates in the Commonwealth. This time we'll have that with Michael Curry from the Mass League of Community Health Centers. He'll also talk about postpartum care, shots for kids, and a whole lot more. He joins us next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Ocean State Job Lot, partnering with customers to provide backpacks to children throughout the Northeast. Learn more at oceanstatejoblot.com. That's oceanstatejoblot.com. Watch home cooks from across the nation showcase their signature dishes as they compete to win the top spot in the search for the Great American Recipe. Tune in tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, in the final months of the Baker administration, criticisms of his leadership of the T are cruising towards top gear on safety, on reliability, and on transparency. Transit advocates Jim Eloise and Stacey Thompson join us to discuss the T's dysfunction and some good transit news. Pedestrian-only zones in Boston's neighborhoods, the first starting this weekend in JP.
I'm Jared Bowen, and for Marjorie Egan, do you value art less if it was created by artificial intelligence instead of a human? Tech writer and podcaster Andy Ihnatko joins us to discuss the latest digital Live Music Friday series with players from the Fenway Porch Fest. That's all ahead on Boston Public Radio.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Biden is preparing to sign an executive order at this hour that's designed to protect access to safe and legal abortion. NPR's Scott Detrow reports Biden has faced increasing pressure from congressional Democrats to take steps to counter the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade.
Today, Biden will be asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services to make sure that medication abortion is available and also to expand access to emergency contraception and IUDs and to increase public education about these things. But the order does not say how those things are going to happen or outline new resources.
That's NPR's Scott Detrow reporting. The executive order does not address calls from some Democratic governors for additional resources to help with abortion care in their states. World leaders are paying tribute to former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was shot and killed today while attending a campaign rally in Japan. Abe was assassinated 2 days before the country's parliamentary elections. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports Abe was 67 years old and Japan's longest-serving prime minister.
Abe was giving a campaign speech for a candidate in Sunday's elections for the upper house of parliament. In video footage of the attack, 2 shots can be heard. Abe was rushed to the hospital but showed no vital signs. Doctors declared his death shortly after 5 p.m. local time. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida called the attack on Abe barbaric and an assault on the core of democracy. Abe served 2 terms as prime minister for a total of 8 years. He pushed to strengthen the country's military, beef up the alliance with the U.S., and jumpstart Japan's economy after 2 decades of stagnation. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
In a White House statement, President Biden said he is stunned, outraged, and deeply saddened by Abe's violent death. Russian forces are continuing to shell the city of Kharkiv in Ukraine's northeast. NPR's Jason Beaubien reports the latest strikes have killed at least 3 civilians and injured 5 others.
The head of the local military administration, Oleg Sinyabov, says the Russian shelling has been concentrated on a neighborhood on the eastern side of Kharkiv and just a few kilometers from the city center. Writing on his Telegram channel, he says residential buildings were hit by what he characterized as massive shelling. Here in Ukraine's second largest city, the rumble and sporadic booms of artillery can be heard throughout the day and night. Sinyabov says the fighting is even more intense just north of the city as Ukrainian troops try to push Moscow's forces back towards the Russian border. Jason Beaubien, NPR News, Kharkiv, Ukraine.
Stocks are trading higher at this hour on Wall Street. The Dow was up 56 points. The Nasdaq Composite up 40. You're listening to NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline. U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts Rachel Rollins' office says a former Department of Defense employee has agreed to plead guilty to charges that he created a no-show job for a female friend and used government money to fund dozens of vacations, including 31 personal trips to Orlando, Florida. Authorities say 59-year-old Thomas Bouchard, who was a contracting officer for the U.S. Army, has agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy and theft of government funds, and they do include arranging a no-show job for his friend that paid nearly $500,000 over 4 years. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft woke up this morning a semifinalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Robert Kraft is looking to become the 16th owner elected to the Pro Football Hall. Kraft was named in the coaches and contributors category along with 28 other candidates that include Mike Shanahan, Mike Holmgren, Art Rooney Jr., Marty Schottenheimer, and Amy Trask. Owners being enshrined is a very rare event. Jerry Jones is the only current one with a bust in the hall, but there's a strong case to be made for Mr. Kraft. Selection committees will whittle their list down on July 27th. In sports, the Red Sox have their work cut out for themselves this weekend with 3 more games with the red-hot Yankees. First pitch tonight of Game 2 is at 7:10. Sun clouds mid-80s today. Sun clouds in upper 70s tomorrow. We're at 79 in Boston right now. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments Wealth Management, offering guidance on retirement income, Social Security, and estate planning. More at FisherInvestments.com. Clearly different money management. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. As we are every Friday, we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Marjorie's on vacation. She's back Monday, sitting in again today. Ably and beyond is my buddy Jared Bowen, who's the executive arts editor here at GBH. Hey, Jared.
Hello again, Jim.
You know, I hate to give out, before we introduce Michael Curry, I hate giving out the streaming thing, because if there's any day, a beautiful Friday, if there was ever a time to come to the library, Newsfeed Cafe, Spicy Jared, the Jim sandwich, of course, which is unbelievable. And as some of you heard, not some of you, everybody who's here at the library, heard a little rehearsal from some of the musicians from the Fenway Porch Fest. We've been ending every Friday with music, which to me is the way to go. And if you're not here now, I'd really come by for some wonderful music and talk. They're going to be on at about 1:30, and they're great, 3 performers. So if you're in the neighborhood, come on by. But first, joining us now via Zoom is Michael Curry. Michael chairs the NAACP's Advocacy and Policy Committee. He's also president and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, and he served on Governor Baker's COVID-19 Vaccine Advisory Committee. Michael, where are you? At Margaritaville again? Where are you? I forget. Where are you today?
Well, I will say this is an actual vacation. And
it is.
I'm sitting in Martha's Vineyard this week. So,
boy, it's tough. How can you handle that? I'll tell you.
Well, I needed a vacation, so I'm glad I was able to come down with family.
Well, you're very sweet also in the middle of vacation to give us time. Good to see you, Michael.
Good to see you as well.
Great to see you. So let's continue a conversation we started having on the show today with our listeners, which is the news coming out of Beacon Hill that they'll issue these $250 one-time payments, kind of in recognition of the really hard situation a lot of people find themselves in. However, it only goes out to those making somewhere between $38,000 and $100,000. In other words, not to the people most in need below that. What do you make of this proposed plan?
Yeah, I think as the Speaker and the Senate President, I know the Speaker in the most recent comments pointed out that there's been funding for folks who are on the lower end of that scale, and that this was targeted towards a different demographic, those making more money than the previous distributions of funds. And I think, the reality is the funds that were distributed earlier under the ARPA dollars were timely and important, but those dollars have run out for those families that are poorer. Those families who make $38,000 or less in income. So while the legislature is looking at meeting this challenge of people who are dealing with rising gas prices, food costs that are ridiculous at this point, we still need to make sure that we're addressing the most vulnerable among us. And I think that they'll find a way to do that.
Well, let me, if I may, I'm going to impersonate Michael Curry, or what I believe would be Michael Curry in this situation. Here's what I would say, in addition to what the real Michael Curry just said. Madam Senate President and Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate your effort, and I think, as I just said, you should expand it to the lowest income people who need it. But with all due respect, as you know, I am the chair of a health equity compact, which is talking about the inequities in the healthcare system that were exposed yet again during the first couple of years of COVID. And I suggest you at least think about redirecting that $500 million to really help low and moderate income people where they need it, fund the beginning of this health equity work. I'm not playing with you. I mean this sincerely. Would that not be a better place to spend $500 million than a $250 check to individuals, even though they do need it?
Well, I'll tell you, as I have vacation fog, you said it better than the real Michael Curry.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I'm serious. I mean, the problem, it seems to me, and you've been around this as long as I have, Michael, is the immediate impact on the voter of Michael Curry standing up and say, I want to thank the legislature for the first $500 million in funding for health equity, which is going to lead in the middle and long term to better results for people of color, low-income people, et cetera. You don't feel the immediate bang for your buck. The $250, there is an immediate bang for your buck, and that's the allure that legislators can't resist, no?
Yeah, I totally agree. We sometimes in these efforts need to realize that we're in a very great position as a state financially. And, we have reserves. We have, our tax revenue is looking good in terms of being able to deploy some dollars in places that are needed. And on top of that, we have federal funding, which we've not spent yet. So this gives us a great opportunity to have a broad reach in the families that we're responding to their financial crisis right now. And it is a crisis, as people can't afford to pay for gas, as they can't potentially afford to put food on the table or pay rent, which is monthly, of course, and their mortgages.
Michael Curry, let's ask you about something we've been talking to a lot of our guests about this week, which is the Patriot Front protest movement through Boston last week. And now, in retrospect, there's a two-pronged focus on authorities. One, how did they not know about this before this event happened? And two, once the calls started to come in that this was happening, why didn't they arrive on the scene en masse? So what do you make of what's happened here, which is, again, a recurrence of something that's already happened at Brigham and Women's and the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and the what many are calling a complete lack of response by police?
Yeah, so it's always disturbing when these hate groups march through Boston or any other city or town in this country, but we know they have a right to do that. But we know it's disturbing that they're in our cities and towns, that they are disturbing our peace with their hate rhetoric. The reality is that we rely on our law enforcement to deal with all groups equally. I happened to be there on the streets during the protests after the murder of George Floyd. I know the reaction of some law enforcement that felt confrontational, quite frankly, with the audiences, the crowds, I should say, that were marching and protesting. As we see hate groups march through our streets, we want them to be, our law enforcement, to be equally as vigilant to keep the peace, equally as responsible to be engaging them proactively and making sure that they're aware of where there could be some conflict with pedestrians, with people on the street. And I just feel like we dropped the ball there. I think many would agree, even in law enforcement, that we were not on top of that.
So I guess you've answered the question that Rachel Rollins at the press conference the other day asked, would they have treated Black Lives Matter protesters the same? I mean, this is not just a one. If the answer to that is no, they wouldn't have, and no, they didn't, according to you who was there, that really poses a far deeper question than just how they handled this particular march of 100 people, Michael Curry.
Yeah, I mean, we have to get past this whole notion that thinking that we treat crowds the same. We don't, right? We don't view the threat the same, right? Even as we just look at the young man who was arrested for the horrendous crime and the shooting at the parade. We don't look at people as the same threat. I remember, and I'll digress to say this really quickly, when Commissioner Evans at the time invited me to speak to the Boston Police cadets years ago. And I remember walking into the room, and probably 95% of them were white men. And I remember asking the question as I was the guest speaker. I said, if you walk up to a scene and a white woman with a knife runs out of the house, when do you shoot? When a middle-aged white man runs out of the house with a knife towards you, when do you shoot? When a young black man with braids and baggy jeans runs out of the house, when do you shoot? And the reality is you can see the look on their faces. They don't shoot all at the same time. And I was making a point to them that we see threat differently. We may retreat with one and not with the other. We may use force at a protest with one and not at the other. We have to really get to this point about racial animus and implicit bias in how we do work in law enforcement throughout this country. And I think this is part of that conversation.
So Jim and I were talking before the show, obviously just profoundly disturbing news what happened in Japan to Shinzo Abe, for anybody who hasn't perhaps heard at this point, shot and killed in that country where guns are virtually prohibited. And Jim and I were talking about the fact that we're seeing what's happening here in this country, and the laws are so strict in Japan. It's kind of staggering to think the lengths at which they've gone, that handguns are forbidden. So are small caliber rifles are illegal to buy or sell. There's a comprehensive, hugely bureaucratic process for anybody who does try to get a gun. There can't be more than 3 gun shops in the country. New cartridges are only purchased after old cartridges are returned. So basically they do everything they can to ensure that there are no guns in the country. And of course this still happened. We understand it was a handmade gun, but I mean, how is it for you to consider the lengths at which some countries have gone to make sure what's happening in the United States now doesn't happen in their own places?
Yeah, so we know countries view the right to carry arms differently, right? And we consider the Second Amendment right here in this country sacred. And we know that by the data, 127 million people in Japan, the 2018 numbers, I think only 9 firearm deaths in Japan at that time. That is shocking. 329.5 million here in the United States. And even at this point in the year, we're over 300 plus mass shootings since January. That should shock us, right? We want to be able to not be Japan, embrace our Second Amendment right, but not allow the Second Amendment right to give free rein, open access to any kind of arms. And quite frankly, you know, as we used to the term weapons of mass destruction, guns that can go into crowds and kill large numbers of people in seconds. This is a threat to all of us. So even if you are a gun-toting Second Amendment person in this country, you have to know that your family could be at risk by this unbridled access to weapons.
Yeah, before we leave this, I want to complete the number you said. You were right. In 2018, there were 9 firearm deaths in Japan. In the same year in the United States, 39,000. 9 firearm deaths in Japan. 39,000 in the United States. Michael Curry, since we so rarely have good news to discuss with you, let's spend a minute. We'll come back to Massachusetts, talk about what your day job is when you're not on vacation, League of Community Health Centers. A huge increase, at least it appears to me, from the state inspired by the governor directed at your work. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been in regular contact with Secretary Sutters and Governor Baker around how do we respond to COVID-19, and particularly keeping up our capacity to do testing and vaccinations as we now vaccinate children at a younger age, as we now need to make sure that with the increase in variants, that we have the capacity to meet people where they are, whether that's mobile testing, whether that's expanded hours, whether that's repurposing our facilities to do vaccinations. So now, we went from a $5 million grant from the administration to what is now a $12.5 million grant to do that work. So credit to the administration for being responsive. We are serving those communities that are high at risk of COVID-19, that are disparately impacted of COVID-19, are those equity targets of the administration. So it made sense to put that investment in the hands of health centers that are on the front lines of doing the work. We're looking at organizations like Boston Healthcare for the Homeless and their testing sites, and the challenge of the communities that they serve that are homeless populations, and some of which are dealing with substance use disorder. And that critical work, that the funds that this provides will help them in their COVID response. Their testing operations managers and leadership and oversight staff that they utilize to reach out into those populations.
And we should make clear for people who haven't heard you say it before, your organization serves, what is it, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million people. Is that not correct?
1 million people.
Throughout Massachusetts.
One in 7 in the state the state of Massachusetts gets their care at a health center, and 1 in 2, every other person in the city of Boston gets their care at one of 22 health centers in the city of Boston.
I didn't know that, Ladder. That's amazing. You know, staying on COVID for one second, I heard a really, I think, disturbing number on NPR when I woke up this morning, is I think vaccination approval by the FDA and the CDC for vaccination for the youngest kids from 6 months to, I always forget, is it 5 years old, whatever it is. The youngest kids is only 3 weeks in place. However, and I understand that's just the beginning, and some pediatricians' offices don't even have it yet, 1% of the eligible kids, nationally this is, not, I don't know what the number is here, 1% are vaccinated. Is that something, should one not be deeply troubled by that, or is it just because it's so early on in the process and I'm overreacting like I do to almost everything? I do. I know I do.
I appreciate overreaction because I think we need to because it's a pandemic. The reality is a combination of a lot of factors. It's one, the recent approval to get kids vaccinated, particularly within certain age ranges. And then two, the other issue is the hesitance that we saw among adults. And you and I, Jim, talked about early in this pandemic, where people wanted to see the science, they wanted to understand the science, they wanted to make sure that it came from a trusted advisor, which were physicians in the medical community. We're here again with children and people, and as you and I and all of us on this call know, as adults, you know, we're cautious about our health. We're even more cautious about our children. So if you're going to put something in my child's arm, I want to fully understand it. I want to make sure that it's necessary. And we have to message this like we message all immunizations, that we do immunize kids for chicken pox and all other things, that the risk of death is minimal in some of those cases, but the protection is great. And we need to message it the same way, that though that relatively the risk is different for children, you don't want to take that risk with your child. You don't want your child to be among that number that has a severe case of COVID-19 or long COVID. So you want to make sure they get vaccinated.
We're talking to Michael Curry from the League of Community Health Centers and the NAACP.
Talking about the Supreme Court ruling and abortion, and this is something, of course, you're dealing with significantly here in terms of reproductive care. How are you beginning to respond, especially as you get this infusion from the state as well, about how you go forward with your centers?
Well, one, I'm just glad we live in Massachusetts, because when you see some of these ridiculous laws that they're passing now that the Supreme Court has opened the door to it, that restricts a woman's right to reproductive health. I'm thankful for Speaker Mariano and Senate President Spoker and Governor Baker and the many legislators who understand the importance of a woman's right to reproductive health. I'm thankful for the community health center movement here in Massachusetts that understands the importance of reproductive health. And no matter what, we'll continue to meet those families and provide care. The reality is, and health centers don't provide abortions, but we definitely provide the services that patients need to think about what it means to be pregnant and what is the health risks associated with that. And unfortunately, there are many women across the country now who are worried about the criminality now of reproductive health and particularly getting abortions and will be potentially denied access to those services, and then potentially, if they have the resources, leaving their states to find that care in other places. And again, to your point earlier around health inequity, Jim, this will disparately impact Black and brown women across this country. We cannot lose sight of that. It will have implications for states' budgets. It will have implications for higher rates of children that are born unhealthy, as the data shows that unwanted pregnancies, children are being born with higher complications. There are all kinds of things that I don't think anyone thought about as they advocated for an end to abortion.
Well, you know, speaking of disparate impacts, I'm reading a story in the Globe. I'll read you the first paragraph. This won't be a surprise to you. Black and Hispanic women in the Boston area who delivered babies during the pandemic were less likely than their white counterparts to schedule doctor's appointments after giving birth, according to a recent study from Brigham and Women's Hospital. We're talking about this morning and saying yet another grotesque example of the kind of disparity we've been talking to you and others about forever. And then we find out that you actually are doing something about this, not just in your League of Community Health Centers world, but in your seat on the national NAACP. What are you doing, Michael?
Yeah, so I presented and drafted a resolution for the national NAACP, and I chair the Advocacy and Policy Committee of the National Board, and it calls for action around deferred care. So it is a resolution that speaks to the fact that many people did not seek care over the last 2+ years because of COVID. That means the higher rates of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, name the disease. that was impacting Black and brown people before this pandemic are now worsened by the fact that they're not getting care. And I think this Brigham's and Women's research underscores that. We need swift and definite action on deferred care. Otherwise, we will see more Black and brown people sick and dying of disease over the next 3 to 5 years when we can do something about it. I want to just lift up really quickly Dr. Thea James and the folks at Boston Medical Center. I get to work quite frequently with the health systems generally, and the hospitals have been doing a lot around maternity health. And they're really taking this different approach of looking at BMC, looking at inequity first, right? A different framework for looking at this. Let's look at the inequity first. Let's figure out what we're doing and what we're doing to contribute to that inequity as hospitals and health centers and others, but BMC's model. And then let's change the systems to prevent that inequity and prevent the outcomes that they're seeing. I think that's disruptive change. And credit to Dr. Thea James, Trina Martin, and Kate Walsh and the team for approaching this very intentionally.
BMC is a remarkable place. Before you go, I don't know if you can quantify this. I don't even know if you can answer. Well, you can answer this. What I worry about is every time there is focus, intense focus on something that really matters, like what you've led in the state and city, frankly, on the health and equity issue, is we Americans have the attention span of gnats for the most part, and we move from one thing to another to another. And it seems to me, not that you need my advice, but Jim, give it anyway, is the beauty of this kind of research, like out of Brigham and Women, is when the focus begins to fade, the focus is turned back on the underlying problem, so we can't ignore it, even if we choose to. And I hope what you're doing, I'm sure what you're doing, is to continue to put this right in our faces so that those of us, again, who have short attention spans can't have a short attention span on this one.
Yeah, you've said it before, and you and I have talked about it before, this development of a health equity compact, 50 plus Black and Latinx leaders who come together to make sure that we center health equity in Massachusetts. We're looking at potentially legislation for the next legislative session that could prioritize funding for communities with high rates of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, looking at a health equity trends hearing, as we have a health equity costs trends hearing, but a health equity trends hearing, where we get folks that have to come before the state and really explain what they're doing around health equity. Jim, the only way that we'll keep the focus on this is if we who have lived experience require that we keep the focus on it. And I'm excited and encouraged because we have more Black and Latinx and Asian and other people of color in health and business leadership in this city and state than we've ever had.
You're going to come back from vacation and work on this, is that right? Or is it you are coming back, right?
I'm getting off this call and getting on a health equity compact from vacation.
Fair enough.
I'll call right after this.
Michael, we really appreciate, in all seriousness, you squeezing into your vacation, which you surely do need. Michael, talk to you soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you both. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Michael Curry is the president and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers. He's also chair of the NAACP's Advocacy and Policy Committee, and he served on Governor Baker's COVID-19 Vaccine Advisory Committee. Well, coming up, dysfunction at the T is nothing new, but it's feeling more urgent than ever. Transportation advocates Jim Aloisi and Stacey Thompson weigh in next.
Sometimes it seems like the news industry is one big runaway train headed way too fast, destination unknown. I'm Elsa Chang. At All Things Considered, we plan our daily voyage carefully and take the time to see the important sights along the way. Don't worry, we'll still get you where you need to go. All Things Considered from NPR News. Enjoy the journey.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Little Leaf Farms, committed to transforming the way food is grown in New England. Fresh lettuce harvested daily in Massachusetts all year round. It's the local lettuce locals love. Learn more at littleleaffarms.com. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Jared Bowen sitting in for Marjorie. She's back Monday. We're at the library, and we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Train derailments, staffing shortages, longer wait times, forget transparency. Safe to say this summer has not been kind to riders of the T. Joining us now to discuss is our transit team, Jim Aloisi and Stacey Thompson. Stacey is Executive Director of the Livable Streets Alliance. Jim is former Transportation Secretary for the state. He's on the Board of Transit Matters and a contributor to Commonwealth Magazine. Stacey is the library. Jim is globetrotting, as he is every time he's on the show. Jim, where are you today, if I may ask? Can I ask or no?
You can ask. I'm in an undisclosed location in the state of. No, I'm actually in Maine. So not that far.
That's modest. Well, it's good to see you both. Thanks so much for being here.
I was going to say that's a well-appointed bunker you're in, so at least you have that going
It's a
for you.
well-appointed bunker, and I have my East Boston is not an airport poster behind me. So
Nice. So let's talk about the latest rash of woes and add to what Jim just listed that T employees were working 20 hours straight with barely a break before coming back on shift, lapsed certifications. I mean, it's just endless now what we're learning about the T. Stacey, we'll start with you. What do you make of everything that we're learning about this system?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say what I've been saying to everyone, which is that this is obviously disappointing, but it is not surprising to those of us who've been following this for a long time. Last fall, folks like me were at the State House saying, look, we need you to hold hearings. We're concerned. There have been a number of incidents, and we've watched this happen over and over again. You have patterns of safety incidences when you're not well staffed, when you have been underinvesting in the operating budget. I think what is more troubling is the information that we learned that it appears that the Baker administration has been holding back information. And that really comes down to what Jim and I have been calling for years now, which is significantly more transparency and accountability when it comes to the T. Jim, I'm sure you've got other thoughts too.
What gets your big reaction? Then I want to return to the lack of transparency, which is putting me right over the edge, Jim.
Well, the big reaction is, unfortunately, as Stacey said, I mean, none of this is a surprise. I do think that we have an unusual sort of parade of unfortunate circumstances coming one after another. That's a little unusual, but it may not, and hopefully it's not the norm. But the fundamental lack of resources at the T that goes back decades and that persists is reaping a very poor harvest for everybody right now. And at a time when we should be building back better from the pandemic, at a time when we should be encouraging more use of transit for any number of reasons, the transit system is finding itself really prevented by lack of resources and by this accumulation of events from responding to the moment the way it should. And this is going to have, I think, massive negative implications for our overall recovery if we don't turn it around quickly.
Because they're basically sending a message, it seems to me, unintended, but a message. You know that thing that Stacey Thompson and Jim Aloisi say to us all the time, ride the T? You got to be crazy. Yeah. I mean, they're not honest with us. There are derailments. There's a guy who's dragged to his death. And even if I had this discussion with you on TV, even if somebody like you, Jim, considers it safe, it's not exactly a message that the average person who's sort of on the fence saying, should I listen to them and ditch this car and spend more time on the T? Who in their right mind is going to do this?
Not to mention that it's now it's less reliable than ever as it slows down the system to address all of these changes.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to be optimistic, even though we're all mad right now, and I'm so mad about this. So I took the T here today. I talked to folks.
You left home last night at 7 p.m. too. You forgot to tell us that part.
I took the T here today. It was a good ride. I talked to folks who are inside the T on a near daily basis, and I think I can say with confidence that most folks who are working for the system know what they're doing, are working hard, and it continues to be safe. We have a leadership problem, and we don't need to be polite about it. We don't need to pretend it's not a problem. The way the Baker administration has handled this is entirely unacceptable, and the hearings that the legislature is about to have are part of that, but the legislature cannot be left off the hook on this one. They have been underfunding the T for many years now. We have been asking for them to pay attention to these problems, to offer oversight as well. This is not just an issue of the general manager. It's certainly not. It's not an issue of Charlie Baker. It is a leadership gap that needs to be addressed.
You know, I know you're both mentioning money. You want to talk about money. We're going to get to money in a minute because I want to talk about transparency. This story by Taylor Dolvin in the Globe about these 3 derailments, you know, not with human beings on it in the yards or something, is grotesque. And by the way, all credit to former Globie Bruce Mull, who is the editor of Commonwealth, the great Commonwealth magazine, for being relentless on this thing. I mean, it's a cover-up. It's not. I'm not trying to be overly rhetorical. It's a cover-up. An attempt. And you wait a second here. And you put that on top of the article that I can never read enough. When the Globe had 4 bulleted items, this was on June 13th, after the Federal Transit Administration announced that it had serious problems with the safety of the system, they list the 4 things. First, the FTA told the T to adequately staff its operations. The Globe asked the T's spokesman, what about that? Joe Pastoro, he declined to release the numbers. The next one, the FTA told the T to put protections in place to prevent safety incidents at rail yards. The spokesman declined to say how many safety incidents. I mean, let me tell you how I react. When a public agency, Jim Eloise, who used to run one, refuses to tell me the truth, the conclusion I read is they're hiding something from me because they know if I knew the truth, even if this is not right, if I knew the truth, I would not use what they provide. Is that an unreasonable conclusion to draw?
It's not. So let me just say, having had the job as secretary some years ago, this is not unique to the Baker administration. This is endemic to most gubernatorial administrations, and that is staff people who really believe sincerely that they have the right to control and run the government, to tell secretaries what to say and do, to tell general managers what to say and do. And what they don't seem to care about is that they tell Steve Pavtak what his communications people have to say.
He's the general manager.
And then they don't care 10 days later that Steve has to go in front of the press with his tail between his legs and actually say the truth, right? Because that's not how it works. What this represents, in my judgment, is as clear an example of failure of the governance structure of the T, right? We keep talking, the legislature keeps changing T boards. The T governance structure, which puts all of the power in the governor and the state, is just wrong for the MBTA. And the legislature needs, with the new governor, to revisit it. Now, if you look around the country, many of the high-functioning transit systems are not necessarily run by state governments. They're run at the municipal level or the county level, where they have strong counties. Some of them are elected, but they're generally hybrids or independent of states. We need to see this as an example of gubernatorial micromanagement by staff people who are not in the trenches, who are not generally experienced in transit planning or policy. And the result is that they're undermining the T. And let me just say, if anyone's been in government for 8 years and doesn't understand that what they put in an email is soon going to be made public.
That's what Jared said this morning.
That's what I said this morning.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what they're thinking.
Stacey, I wanted to turn to your anger about this. And let's break down the anatomy of this so people completely understand what the Globe has presented here, which was there were active questions from media about derailments that they had got wind of. And we see very transparently, ironically, that the communication, don't answer this question, answer it this way, don't acknowledge this, don't confirm that. So as these hearings get convened, what do you expect to come? Can something come out of them?
Yes. So I just want to go back and bump what was said earlier. We only have this information, basic information about the FTA investigation and these derailments because of the reporting of Taylor Dolvin. So I think we need to be grateful for the great reporting and Bruce Moll and others who have just been really, really relentlessly digging at this, because we wouldn't have this information to even have these conversations without a free media. Having said that, I completely agree. It is shocking. I think that the hearings are a first step. We're going to get more information, but what I think I'm looking for from the legislature, from the two co-chairs that are leading this, are action steps, right? Are they going to appoint an independent oversight commission for the T? Are they going to flex resources? Are they going to implement something else, right? We don't need a dog and pony show. We don't need, days of hearings for them to...
Which they so often are.
Yeah, we need action from the legislature. And I also just want to pull in something else, because around transparency, I think everyone is looking at the gubernatorial campaign and saying, we kind of think we know who's going to win and we're not thinking about it. We have other statewide campaigns that could make a difference. We need to be paying attention to the state auditor race, because that office has a role in transparency and accountability. Secretary of State is also a hot race right now, and I feel like we are not talking about how these sleeper candidacies, these sleeper offices can play a role around fixing the accountability and transparency issues in the state in the next in 2023.
By the way, if you had taken a dog and pony, you probably would have gotten here faster. So Jim Aloisi, Governor Baker is going to be here on July 21st. I assume what he's going to say when Marjorie or I repeat your words about underfunding, before I finish the sentence, he's going to say, I have invested $8 billion in the T, more than anybody who sat in this office before me. What's the response to that? Well, it's not an assertion. He has invested $8 billion. Sure. What's the answer?
So the answer is investing capital dollars is great, but if you can't spend those capital dollars as wisely or quickly as you want to, because you don't have an operating budget that's adequate to hire and train the skilled professionals who will actually project manage and do the job, then all you're doing is treading water. Right now, the governor, to his credit, I think a week ago, was quoted. Lisa Kaczynski from Politico asked him a question, and he responded, and he said, yeah, I'm going to address the operating budget issue. I don't know what he means by that. You might ask him that specific question, because that's actually a good sign that this message is broken through to the governor's office. You might also ask him if he's going to send the MBTA chapter in the book he wrote with Kadish for revision.
Do you want to just do the interview, or do you want to just send me?
Yeah, bring us on in. We'll do it for you.
Talking to Jim Aloisi and Stacey Thompson. So what's your response to the funding thing that about, again, factually accurate, $8 billion has been invested in the the capital side of the
I'm going to
budget.
use the same analogy that I use over and over again. Charlie Baker inherited an old house that needed repairs. He put a new roof on the house, but he hasn't been paying the bills for the last 8 years. Right? And so if you haven't been paying for the electricity, if you haven't been paying for the general maintenance, the house is still going to fall apart. And so I think you can say, yes, he's done some things, but was it enough? Demonstrably no. And it's tough, right? I mean, Jim Aloisi knows this. Any politician who's been a two-term governor, they're going to make mistakes. They're not going to be perfect. But he has been we have submitted 30 different reports saying you are underfunding the T.
Yeah, but can I respond to you both? I'm sorry to interrupt. Charlie Baker came into studio to lead a discussion we had with Juliette Kayyem and her new book a couple of months ago. And the discussion they got into, which I loved because something I've been obsessed with for years, is the desire of elected officials to get immediate return on their financial commitments. You know, for example, why don't we fix the pension system? Because there's no immediate impact, and by the time people see an impact, it's 30 years from now, that doesn't benefit me. The thing I don't understand about the Baker decision, starting with you, Jim, is if I had to choose one of the two, if my concern was making my constituents happy, it wouldn't be the capital end of the budget, which is much harder to see. It'd be the operational end, so that people like us can't complain about the fact that there's less reliable, less frequent service. Why was that decision made in your estimation?
I think because it's politically more difficult to do. Because when you're raising money for the capital budget, you're raising basically borrowed money. right? It's in the bond bill.
I see.
And you're going to the private markets and you're putting bonds out and you're using basically private investment capital to pay for this stuff. So it's easy. You're not asking the taxpayer to do more.
I see.
But the operating budget, right? The operating budget, that's pay as you go. That's funded by fares, by sales tax, by actual money that people spend. And so politically, it's very, very different, very, very difficult. And I think that is the one and only and chief answer to that question. People and the optics of saying I spent $8 billion sounds great. It's the politically easy thing to do, but it is only half of the equation. And now we're dealing with the fact that we'd have to, I just want to say one other thing. The FMCB of late memory, this is not quite a money issue, but a Baker issue. It left a pretty good legacy and a lot of things left undone, initiatives. If you look at what has been left undone and untouched from the former FMCB by this current board, it's basically almost everything.
What does that stand for? Financial Management Control Board? What does
Fiscal Management and Control Board, right? And so something that could have been an important positive legacy for this administration has been left to lie fallow by this new board that doesn't seem to care or be interested in following up on really worthy initiatives, right? A Better City put out a report on what's happening and what's not happening. And I think it's worth people focus on that as well. There's a lot that needs to happen. But again, on the side, politicians, unfortunately, will generally always take the path of least resistance, which means the operating budget gets underfunded.
Okay,
right?
so can I say one last thing I want to direct to you, Stacey, and especially on this issue, since you mentioned the legislature shouldn't be off the hook. For people who want to blame Charlie Baker for all this, the legislature has enough votes to override anything that the Republican governor does. If the Democratic legislature decides before or after hearings, we got to do what Aloisi and Thompson say to us in terms of, I'm serious, funding of the operating budget, they could do it. Charlie Baker could say, I don't have the money. I'm going to veto it, assuming he would, for argument's sake. I don't know if he would. And they could override the veto and it would become law, correct?
Yes, exactly. And I actually have been saying right now, as angry as I am at Charlie Baker, I am more angry at the legislature. And a good example of the inaction that we're seeing is the House. The House just passed a transportation bond bill. Just a reminder, last session, they also passed a bond bill, the House and the Senate, and it included a low-income fare provision that the governor vetoed. We have been waiting for a year and a half for them to simply pass the thing they passed last year. They not only did not include it in this year's bond bill, when Adrian Madero added an amendment, they rejected. Yeah, he's a state rep. They rejected the amendment.
East Boston.
So what we are seeing is that they have actually moved something forward that is less progressive. They've taken a step back.
Why?
I don't know. I think we need to ask them, right? So we're now leaving it to the Senate to hopefully pick up the pieces and add something for low-income riders. But this is something that the legislature should do, must do. Our essential riders are still on this service. The service still sucks and is getting worse, and they can't afford to get on the train. And the legislature isn't doing even the tiniest thing for riders right now. And they have the power to override that veto. So I think it's one example, and I know it doesn't feel connected to safety, but it is demonstrative of a larger issue where they have the power and they're not using it.
All right, should we take a look?
I want to echo that. I just don't want anybody to think Stacey is alone in thinking that the legislature is fully and wholly a part of the problem here, and they need to change that.
Right, for a little sorbet to this conversation, we'll depart for a second to talk about open streets.
Oh, great.
Get people off the subway, the not moving subway, out onto the streets. We were reminded of this just around the corner here from the Boston Public Library, where there was an experiment to close down Dartmouth Street and turn it into kind of like a European-style pavilion.
And it was great,
with art and food. Yeah, and so it's coming up again. Jamaica Plain is the next spot this coming Sunday, I believe.
Center Street and JP. Yes. August 6th, Blue Hill Ave in Roxbury. Saturday, September 24th, Dot Ave. And by the way, it used to be just Newbury Street for the last few years, but they're going out to the neighborhoods.
So how's this, are we still considering this a pilot or an experiment? How is it going so far?
I think that this is classically the kind of pilot that's just going to become permanent, right? There is an overwhelming amount of excitement. I live in Jamaica Plain. I will be out all day Sunday and encourage people to join us. You can walk or bike there. You could take transit, but you can walk or bike. And I think that there's just a lot of joy. And I think everyone needs some joy right now in their lives, needs to enjoy our streets. So I think we will only see an expansion after this summer because, as you noted, right outside the library, it was pure joy for days.
We talked to Mayor Wu about this the other day, and we said, what's the assessment thing that's going on vis-a-vis the Dartmouth Street up to the church, from the library to the church closing? And she says, obviously she likes it, was her idea, but they're doing an analysis now. Is this city, which often seems to be locked in the past when it comes to behaviors, Jim Aloisi, you've been here around a little bit, is it ready to do something that much of the rest of the world, including my hometown of Philadelphia, has done in lots of spots? Is it ready for this? The city leadership, I don't mean the
I think so. I think we have an extraordinary mayor and a strong city council that is understanding that the way we build a stronger, modern 21st century city coming out of the pandemic is to reimagine and rethink the urban public realm, the urban streetscape, the neighborhood streetscape, to encourage people to do more healthy activities, to support small businesses that thrive when there's more foot traffic on the street, right? And so they get it. I think the people of the city get it. And it's a great time to be a Bostonian, to witness what I think is going to be, frankly, a moment of important inflection where the city is embracing the 21st century really for the first time and getting the recovery from the pandemic right. And by right, I mean from an urban public realm perspective, reimagining what it looks like and how it functions. It's probably the biggest transformation from that design's perspective that we've had in well over a century. So it's a great thing.
By the way, and again, if you didn't go to this Dartmouth Street thing or you haven't been in Newbury Street in past years, Newbury will be August, I think. She didn't have the dates yet when Michelle Wu, when she was with us. Go to JP or Roxbury or Dorchester on these days in July, August, and September. It is just transformational. It's wonderful. We have a minute or two left. I don't want to get in the usual fight with you about cyclists.
But you do.
But I am. By the way, every time you and I have this, I get so much hate text, tweets. And I want to be clear here. I want common ground. I do. Having said that, there was just litigation filed by those who think the cycle lanes in Cambridge went too far. The judge denied an injunction. The plaintiffs not only want no more cycle lanes, segregated lanes, they want the lanes that were created to be gotten rid of. Here's my analysis to you, because you and I are like so far apart, even though I'd like to think I'm in the middle on this. If compromise is not reached in Cambridge, the desire of the Stacey Thompsons of the world to expand what is being experimented on in Cambridge is going to begin and end there. There is such animosity between the players, regardless of who has the right position, that it seems, again, whatever we do in Cambridge is never going to be translated anywhere, transferred anywhere, because elected officials are going to say, I don't want to be involved in this fight, even if it's a good idea. Why aren't people like you urging leaders who are respected to convene players on both sides rather than going to court and suing to try to cut some sort of compromise?
So we are actually doing that. So, and I think that this isn't a both sides. It's not the Stacey Thompsons of the world.
I shouldn't have put it that way. You're right,
but I think that that's how this is often framed. And the folks that I represent are people who don't own cars, working parents, people who need walking, biking, and transit options, who frankly don't have the money to go frivolously sue government. So it is not a one-to-one. It is about those who need access to the public space in order to live and exist in a community. And so there has been an enormous amount of work to bring various folks to the table. And
by whom?
By the city, by my team, who have literally been on the ground in Cambridge, talking to people in the street, talking to everyday folks, hundreds of everyday folks on Mass Ave in Cambridge. And that work is happening. I think we were told the same thing 15 years ago when we started Livable Streets. Why are you bothering? You're never going to get that paint down, and look at the city. I think that there are always people who are going to freak out when their access to a free public space to store their vehicle is going to happen, and we need to move past that because this is about equity, and it's about making sure that everyone has access and can use our public streets. And
I want you to know, to prove there is progress, then we got a break. I actually walked 2 whole blocks to Flower Bakery the other day. And you know why?
Did you survive?
Because of you, Stacey. I want you to know, 2 blocks.
Next time you can bike.
Jim Aloisi, Stacey Thompson, as always, it's great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Stacey Thompson is Executive Director of the Livable Streets Alliance. Jim Aloisi is former Transportation Secretary for Massachusetts, on the Board of Transit Matters, and a contributor to Commonwealth Magazine. Coming up, our tech expert Andy Ihnatko says new technology for AI-generated art could, quote, revolutionize visual creativity. I can't say it because the arts editor might have something to say about this. He'll tell us about it right after this break. You're listening to
GBH's Morning Edition with Paris Alston and Jeremy Siegel.
We have a newsletter called The Wake Up, which is a way for us to not only round up everything that we're talking about and seeing.
The Wake Up is also a place where you can talk to us.
A place for you to tell us about something interesting you've seen around town lately.
We've had a lot of people who want to be part of the conversation, and we want more people to be part of the conversation. You can do that by going to gbhnews.org/The Wake Up.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Riverwoods Group, the Seniority Authority podcast, is committed to helping people get smarter about growing older, with interviews where physicians, researchers, scientists, and thought leaders answer questions on aging. SeniorityAuthority.org. And the Boston Public Market in downtown Boston, offering fresh, regionally sourced food, prepared meals, and specialty items from 30 local farmers and artisans. This message funded by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism.
Trusted. Local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Jared Bowen sitting in for Marjorie. She's back Monday. We're live at the Boston Public Library. Before we start, by the way, we're about 30-plus minutes away from some fabulous music. If you're not here, I would go out of my way if I were you and join us for the last half hour of the show. And secondly, just to bring you up to speed, when former federal judge Nancy Gertner was here with us at 11:30, that was when Joe Biden was expected to sign the executive order, doing as much as he could, according to him, by executive order to protect a right to reproductive freedom in this country. He didn't take to the podium until about noon, but here is sort of the centerpiece of what he had to say, describing the executive order he was about to sign.
I'm signing this important executive order. I'm asking the Justice Department that, much like they did in the civil rights era, to do something, do everything in their power to protect these women seeking to invoke their rights. In states where clinics are still open, to protect them from intimidation, to protect the right of women to travel from state that prohibits seeking the medical attention that she needs to a state to provide that care. To protect the woman's right to the FDA-approved, the Federal Drug Administration-approved medication that's been available for over 20 years.
That was the essence of what he had to say. There was obviously a lot more he urged people to vote, too, which I assume most people were thinking about even before they heard from the president. For now, though, joining us in person to explain the latest news in AI advancements and online privacy is our authority on the subject. That would be Andy Ihnatko. Andy's a tech writer and blogger. You can check out his work at ihnatko.com. That's IHNATKO. Or follow him on Twitter at Ihnatko. And I don't think we've seen him in person in about 4 or 5 years. It is great to see you, Andy. How are you?
So great. I'm so happy to be here. I just wish that the MBTA hadn't changed the commuter rail schedule so they have to get up an extra hour and a half early. That's usually a very expensive hour and a half for
Perfect timing for that comment. Andy, it's great to see you.
Great to be here.
Great to be with you, Andy. Actually, that was a perfect segue, what we just heard from the president, into something we want to ask you about, which is location data probably matters now more than ever because of the way that women can be traced for visiting reproductive centers. And going forward, as we know, things are shifting dramatically about where they can go and how there might be condemnation later, or there could be criminal liability there. So where is Google entering into this? Because we do know our locations are tracked, our movements tracked.
And it's becoming even more dangerous because law enforcement are using some pretty offensive tools now that they know that, hey, everyone's carrying a phone. That phone is transmitting location data to Google and other services. They actually have these things, you're not going to believe it, called geofence warrants, where the cops can say, you know what, I have no idea who might be committing a crime at this location, or if any crimes are being committed at this location, but what the heck, let's just subpoena Google to say, give us the identifiable device IDs of everyone who was at this location, passed through this location, or near this location on a certain date. So you can imagine that if a litigation or prosecution-happy state decided that we want to make an election campaign out of this, we want to find as many women who are seeking abortions as possible and get them as many of them arrested and in jail as possible. This leaves them really, really vulnerable. But they did make, the day after Roe was reversed, they did make a very important policy change that will hopefully make that a lot harder.
And so what should we be mindful of, first of all, and how quickly do they erase that data? I mean, what do we have to be aware of?
What they decided to do is that obviously they do track you wherever you go. However, they announced that in the coming weeks they're going to be adjusting all of their policies so that if any Google user or any Google track person visits a location that Google knows is a place where you might want extra privacy, it will automatically be deleted, that data, within a short interval of time. And it's not only abortion clinics, but it's also fertility centers, counseling centers, domestic violence shelters, addiction treatment, even cosmetic surgery clinics, where you don't want people to be able to, in a duck hunt, find out something that is very, very personal and private. So they can't avoid collecting it, but the point is that they will delete it so that even if the cops do subpoena them, and they're very good at fighting subpoenas, they're forced to hand over data, this data will not be included because they will not have it.
Does delete really mean delete? I mean, what's a good example? When they were talking about seizing the phone of the former Justice Department lawyer, I think this is the case, a couple of weeks ago, which they actually did. One of the things that an FBI official said on CNN, what's the value of doing it there as opposed to through the phone company or the company through which they get their service, is the ability to access deleted texts and things is immense, said the expert. So back to my question, what does delete mean in real terms?
In Google's terms, it simply means that the data that a police investigation would try to subpoena from them does not exist, so they are
gone forever.
There's a little bit of weasel language in there, but if they were trying to be deceptive about actually having data they could share with the police, that would be pretty evil of them, so I don't believe so. But you do have a really good point. This doesn't solve the problem. It just plugs one hole in the sieve. For instance, there's been a lot of discussion about a lot of women who use health apps that track their periods. And a couple of reporters that I know who are women did a really exhaustive investigation of the privacy policies of a lot of these apps, and they concluded that there just are no apps where a police action could not simply subpoena information to find out, well, what was your self-recorded cycle like during this period. Apple Health is the closest. Because Apple is paramount security, paramount privacy. But even there, you have to know how this stuff works and know that, gee, if I'm having my phone backed up to iCloud, suddenly all that stuff is unencrypted and in the open. And so a subpoena could reveal that information. It's really tricky.
You've just made me realize that we're talking about Google here, but are there just myriad organizations that are collecting our location data? So Google may shut it down, but you can be tracked anywhere else?
Imagine a really, really virulent prosecutor. Or even a private group that really wants to stick it to people that they don't like. There's nothing stopping them from parking a van with an automated license plate scanner on a public street. Well, we'll automatically record every license plate that visits or comes through a certain location, and then that becomes their data. There are also data collection companies that for a couple of $100 will sell you location data on pretty much everybody, because it's not just Apple, it's not just Google. I do believe that they try very, very hard to make their products useful without collecting more information than they absolutely need to do. But it's all these little tiny weaselly companies that are harvesting data from apps. It's just terrible.
So what's the stop? I don't want to belabor this, but what's the stop Governor Abbott, for example, from the state of Texas directly contracting with what you just called these little Weasley companies and hire one little Weasley company at whatever key checkpoints there are, pay them with state funds and collect the data and then turn it over to prosecutors?
Nothing. And it's even worse than you think, because when you're talking about getting data from Apple and Google, they have to have a court order. They have to come to a judge and say, yes, we're demanding this data. And there are rules for that kind of data. However, there's nothing preventing cops, the FBI, anybody from simply buying data that's available on the open market. They don't need a warrant. They don't need to prove that there's a reason for it. This is the Wild West of United States policy about data privacy. There is none. Health data is protected. Nothing else is protected in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, so let's move to what should have been, or should be, a light and wonderful topic, but it appears that you're going to end up in a debate with Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, you exposed Marjorie and me for the first time to this AI-created art thing. I don't even remember what it was called.
That's how much it resonated.
What was it called? What was it called?
This is an algorithm called DALL-E 2, but there were a bunch of companies that are making stuff.
It was stunning. First of all, before you two get into a discussion about this, explain what it is, what it does, and how it works.
It's very, very simple. You're going to think I'm dumbing it down, but it is literally this. Describe a picture that you want to see in simple, plain English. This artificial intelligence system and this machine learning app will make a brand new picture that conforms to that description. And it's not like it's going to be doing Google image search and say, well, he wanted a horse. Here's a picture of a horse. Great, we'll cut out the horse. I've been playing with these for the past 2 months, trying to make it fail and trying to find the weaknesses. You can generate 10 copies, 100 copies of the same picture. You will not see the same images.
Okay, give a sample command so that people understand what you're talking about.
Okay, I'll give you one using this really cool free version that just hit. I was testing it by saying, I want to see a portrait of a young woman wearing virtual reality glasses in the style of one of my favorite artists, Egon Schiele. And this...
You could say in the style of a particular artist.
You can say, I want this to be, again, plain English. Say, I want to see, another one I tried, a Fenway Park made out of gingerbread, but I want it to be not photorealistic. I want it to look like a child's book illustration. And the more detail you give it, the more closely it will hew to what you gave it. And the private ones that are being researched by Google and OpenAI, they're super, super powerful. They're so good, you would not question this is a photograph. You would not question...
could you put that back up on the screen again, what we saw a minute ago?
Right.
What are we looking at there?
So this is a junior version of this. Like, I just want to quickly point out that the really good ones that could fool people, Google, for instance, just did a blog post saying, look, we're working on this, the results are great, but there are ethical concerns we really need to take a look at. We also need to make sure that there aren't any cultural biases. Like if someone says, I want a photo of a thief robbing a bank, is it going to be a person of color more often than that's their sort of stuff? But this is the junior version. This is called Crayon, C-R-A-I-Y-O. And if you go to my Twitter account, I've already posted a link to it. And it's just a web app. You don't need to install anything. The description is just a portrait of a young woman wearing virtual reality goggles, painted in the style of Egon Schiele.
And that's free.
That's free, and as you see, it gave you 9 different versions to choose from. And
okay, Jared Bowen, what's your problem?
Well, first of all, you fight fiercely, Andy Ihnatko, because Egon Schiele is also one of my favorite artists. I have not seen that, and it's pretty incredible, although I can see where this issue of theft certainly comes into play, because it looks like you're appropriating an Egon Schiele image and putting these virtual reality goggles. So when I did the experiment this morning, I typed in dog in an amusement park, and I got a bunch of pictures that I think are they're just not my taste. But my question is why?
I want you to imagine how many kids were editing film and video when we were kids in the 70s and 80s, and how many are doing it now. That's because there are two elements to almost any type of creative endeavor. There's the creative part where here's something in my head that I want to translate to a real thing. And then there's the work that's just technical work. And the reason why you have kids that are making brilliant videos on their phones.
But they're making them.
No, but here's what I'm getting to. It strips away the technical stuff of this by saying that, no, I don't need to, if I want to cut this scene, all you do is select it and delete. I don't have to razor cut it. I don't have to match them back together. I don't have to match the sound. And to my point of view, and I agree that this is a really good topic for an extended debate, imagine you don't know how to paint, but you have this idea in your head. And imagine you're not just simply accepting what the app gives you. One of my experiments was I wanted to do the same thing but with Edward Hopper, and it wasn't getting it quite right. So I was basically saying, okay, you got that right, but there should be just one window, but really bright lighting. And the woman should be actually sitting on the edge of the bed, not on the bed. So now imagine spending 2 hours refining these things, where it stops being, hey, I rubbed the magic lamp and the genie gave me this free image, and now it really is something that did not exist and conforms to exactly the picture inside your head, except, again, there are wonderful things to knowing how the tools work and knowing how paint works and how to mix paint and how to create impasto.
A lot of wonderful things.
But
that's a different thing. I mean,
right, exactly.
I mean, so yeah, I'm struggling. I don't know 1/100th as much about any of this as either of you do.
Not necessarily about that, but it's for me, it's about how it resonates. And so, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking of David Hockney, super well-known artist who has really turned to painting via the iPad. But he is doing this himself, whereas this, I still don't comprehend. So yes, you're typing in cues to have a computer make the art for you, and I can understand that it could be a tool for storyboarding. Go back to the film analogy, and suddenly it helps, and it's there, and it's visual for you. If you don't necessarily have the artistic capability yourself, I certainly don't, so I would need to do that. But if we're talking about looking to AI or computer-generated art to stand the test of time or to be in gallery walls, or this is where it starts to lose me, because there's no emotional connection to this whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, imagine the Salvador Mundi, that auction for $450 million.
Yes.
And you can get lots of videos.
Allegedly painted by Leonardo.
Exactly, by Da Vinci. And people see this, oh my God, this really is the savior. I'm having an emotional moment. Would it be ruined if you said, actually, there's a lot of controversy. We don't know for sure that Leonardo da Vinci actually touched this at all. We think that it's likely he did the eyes and the face, and he had studio assistants do the rest of the body. Now, is this a lesser thing? Is the emotional impact that I'm feeling when I see this cheapened or lessened by the fact that it's not necessarily an autograph work? Is a Jeffrey Koons piece not good to people who like that stuff because he has a studio of 100 people who basically does his stuff? That's actually his philosophy. He thinks that I want my idea to be pure. If I'm manipulating the steel to paint myself, I'm going to change my mind as I go through it.
How about that one?
I respect your opinion, though.
Jim wants me to fall here.
No, I like
can
that
see
one.
where this is going. But no, I can see your point, because I argue that we should go in and look at art without looking at the wall label and the text, to not have that context first. So it shouldn't matter to you who it was painted by or what is coming in there. But I just look at these images, but I know the context here.
Right.
The images
But
wait,
can you stay on his point for a second? What's the difference between the image generated by AI and the image generated by the intern who works for the brilliant conceiver of ideas?
Al Weiwei, for instance.
What's the difference?
Well, then it's past information. It's coming from the same workshop. It's a shared experience. You see the hand of the creator in this experience, whereas this popped up on my screen in a second after the 3 minutes of producing the image appeared. When I go to a museum and I encounter a piece of art, or I go out onto the street and I come across a piece of art, I know... you're going back to the context. I completely understand what you're saying, but I think it just ruins it for me to understand that this came from software, which is so cold and chilling.
By the way, this is the guy who yesterday, this is Jared, if you were listening yesterday, this is the guy with Christopher Muther from the Globe, who is reveling in the fact that there were $175 million avatars of ABBA and their 4 members created for a show in London.
But isn't the hand of the artists there? Because they created
the hand of the artist,
their
Andy Ihnatko, is there. I'm serious. Is there too? It came out of his head.
But it's there.
He just didn't do the execution.
I just feel it's different.
I want to ask you, I'm not baiting you, I'm asking...
Bait him, please.
No.
I can take it.
I'm not good at this. How do you feel about Jackson Pollock's splatter art, where he doesn't know where, he knows vaguely where it's going to go, but it's gravity and the physics of liquids that actually makes the image? That's not his creation. He doesn't have a lot of control over it. You would say that even the lack of control he gave to the process is part of the vibrance of the motion of these images.
But I would argue that he very much knew what he was doing. And there was full-on intent there. Okay. I grant there's full-on intent here too, but for me, the distinction is knowing the context. And
what's the name of the guy that makes the glass sculptures that hang from the ceiling?
Dale
He's
Chihuly.
out of Seattle.
Dale Chihuly.
Yeah, I was there. I was at the thing in Seattle. Exactly like this artist. He has all these kids. I don't mean to disparage the kids working for him. He comes up with a concept, and they do the sculpting.
And a lot of the Renaissance paintings we look at, it's the same thing.
It is?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. It's the studios that put these. They're in the business of making and selling art. You have the one master who comes up with the ideas. He doesn't have time to make everything himself. I guess one of the biggest breaks, and this is where this continues to be interesting, is that I see the AI, the tool, as the extension of the hand of the creator. Just like again, if if one of the masters is painting through an iPad, he's never touched that image at all. He is letting layers of software between his fingertip or an Apple Pencil and interpretive algorithms to figure out the swoosh that he's doing there. How should the software interpret how it goes? And he's free to say, no, that's no good, undo, let's do that again. Or he's free to say, you know what, I like the brush strokes that this other person has in his art. This is actually a commercial brush that I can install in this app. I'm going to spend $100 and get it because I want that tool. Just like there was a time when all oil painters mixed their own paint from pigment and oil, but then you could get tubes of art, of paint.
But look at how much time I promise I'll end after this.
No, you can do this all day as far as I'm concerned.
But look how much time you just spent describing that whole process versus the 10 seconds it took me to type in dog in an amusement park this morning.
Okay, but if you're not happy with it, say, I want the dog to be a little bit to the left. You can say, no, I don't want the sky to be sunny, I want it to be overcast. And imagine that this isn't, like I said, this will only spend 3 minutes calculating the
Why
image.
don't you guys take it outside?
No, I'll wrap.
I'm kidding. Wait a second. Before you do this, is this going to go up on the screen? Me at a hot bar? Is that someone created during the break, or can we not put this on the screen?
That is Charles Dana, a woman wearing a Darth Vader helmet.
No. I'm talking about me at a hot bar. One of our coworkers created this beautiful work of art. Luckily, we can't put it on the screen. Yep. Andy Ihnatko, unfortunately, all the other things we're going to talk about, we can't talk about.
I love this conversation.
When
you get off work, let's get 5 beers and then fight.
Agreed.
By the way, I love that discussion. Andy, it's great to see you as always.
Great to be back.
Thanks. And by the way, tell people what the name of the site is again.
Yeah,
or they can just go to your Twitter account.
CRAIYON. But if you go to WGBH's site, you'll see my name spelled out correctly. That's also
IHNATKO.
Go on Twitter. I've already posted links to that and some of these images that you're seeing right now.
Great to see you, Andy. Thanks for coming by. Really good to see you in the flesh.
Even better, I think we can take it downstairs and have this conversation on stage at the Robb Lecture Center here. Andy Ihnatko is a tech writer and blogger. You can find his work at ihnatko.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Ihnatko. Again, that's IHNATKO. Well, coming up, in an age of minimalism and Marie Kondo, one Boston Globe writer and BPR contributor, that would be Matt Gilbert, is embracing the clutter. We'll open up the lines to ask you about the sentimental junk you can't help but hold on to. That after the quick break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Sometimes it seems like the news industry is one big runaway train headed way too fast, destination unknown. I'm Elsa Chang. At All Things Considered, we plan our daily voyage carefully and take the time to see the important sights along the way. Don't worry, we'll still get you where you need to go. All Things Considered from NPR News. Enjoy the journey.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Ocean State Job Lot, partnering with customers to provide backpacks to children throughout the Northeast. Learn more at oceanstatejoblot.com. That's oceanstatejoblot.com. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked the nation's #1 children's hospital by U.S. News & World Report, where families from Massachusetts and the world come for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jared Bowen sitting in for Marjorie. I'm Jim Bradley. We're live at the Boston Public Library. By the way, a ton of people, I didn't even invite it, texting. This is a real threat to artists, says one. Would this way of, quote, creating be acceptable in writing a story, a song, or a poem? A lot of great issues, which we will continue with you, actually, down the line. In about 15 minutes or so, we're going to have some incredible music from 3 performers at this weekend's Fenway Porch Fest. But first, in a new column for The Globe, TV critic Matt Gilbert gets sentimental about the clutter he's amassed through the years. Movie ticket stubs, old books, homemade coffee mugs he made in grammar school, all collecting dust, but all sparking enough joy to justify keeping around. Sparking joy, of course, is the catchphrase from the legendary Marie Kondo, who built her career making the opposite case for living minimally wherever possible. We want to know if you can relate to Matt's love letter to clutter. Or you're more like Shirley Leung, you'll remember, who told us this week that the joy of filling a dumpster outside her house with crap from her house over Memorial Day weekend eclipsed the fun she had on the July 4th weekend. In his piece, Matt Gilbert writes, quote, these dumpster lovers preach with the vigor of those who found a higher path, almost cult-like in their insistence that purging is the only way to find peace in the present tense. We want to know, are you more of a Matt or more of a Shirley? And what joys has holding on to junk specifically brought to you? 877-301-8970. Call us or text us soon, because as I say, only going to spend about 15 minutes on this, and then we're going to turn to music to end our day. Which camp are you in? I can't remember. You got to be in the Marie Kondo, big time, right?
Yeah, I mean, think of how passionate I was about art with Andy just now. Yeah. I have the total opposite amount of passion for stuff. Just get rid. I'm Team Shirley.
So do you not buy stuff, or you throw it out so that you're clutter-free?
Well, I try not to buy too much, but I'm a big fan of throwing things out.
Well, by the way,
or recycling.
When I first heard of Marie Kondo 4 or 5 years ago, I totally got into the concept. I've said on the air a million times, there is nothing quite as satisfying, I mean this, as filling a box with stuff that you have not touched. Papers, documents, books you haven't touched in years, and getting rid of it. Having said that, and I do some of that, and I would love to do more operationally, I think I end up in the Matt. I have far too much stuff, and it's really hard to part with it. What Marie Kondo is, if you haven't used something, is it 6 months? I can't remember, whatever it is. Yeah. If it doesn't spark joy in it, get rid of it.
For me, it's 45 seconds.
Is that, yeah. You know, I literally am of the school, I'm not quite as extreme as Matt. I literally fall into the category of person who deludes myself into thinking, I mean this, my right hand is up. I haven't worn that jacket in 17 years, but I think I'm going to wear it this weekend. I know this will shock you. I didn't.
Yeah.
But I still have it. 877-301-8970. 2 different approaches to clutter. The Matt Gilbert pro-clutter position and the pro-dumpster position of Shirley. She wouldn't let us put the photograph on air. Did you see the photograph?
I did see the photograph.
She has this huge dumpster outside her personal home with her husband and 2 kids, full to the brim with crap from their house. And unfortunately, you didn't get to see her as we did that day on Zoom. The joy in her face was just...
I will come over to your house. I'll come over to your house and throw
well, you know, there
stuff.
are people, when we first did a Marie Kondo segment, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, people who were in the business, organizing closets, and I don't mean to minimize it, it's a huge and important thing, offered for free to actually do it. And I said yes on the air, which I meant, and then I got skittish, and I turned it down after the fact. Nancy and Merrimack, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for the call. Hi.
Hi, Nancy.
Nancy.
Hi, I think I have a very interesting problem.
We'll decide that. Go ahead.
Anyway, my husband and I have spent most of our adult life rebuilding an 18th century house, and it's the house that's son of the first child born on the Mayflower, and we filled it full of beautiful handmade 18th century furniture. And, one could say it's clutter, and on the other hand, it's a collection of absolutely beautiful handmade furniture. And we realized that with the wave of a magic wand, it's all called brown furniture and has absolutely no value. And it's heartbreaking to think that we have gone from revering our history to now seeing it as, just get the auction truck and load it up.
Well, go ahead.
Well, my take on that is, but you have enjoyed it for so long. It gave you joy, it gave you beauty. You love looking at it and experiencing it, and hopefully that will suffice. Because I will tell you, part of my lesson in all of this was I remember when my grandmother died, and I remembered how important things were to her that she had, and I saw what happened when she died, which is the natural course of things. Everything was distributed and just gone, and it was fairly traumatizing to me actually. But I think it kind of set me on a path to recognize, yes, I have to enjoy what I have, but be fully aware that there's going to come a time where nobody else is going to appreciate it the way I did.
You've thought a lot about this.
Well,
it
impacted me. It had a huge impact,
bet.
rather.
Hey, Nancy, thank you for the call. Well, I think I mentioned this there before. I know I've told Marjorie. My mother, the love of my mother's life was not my father, believe me. It was her first husband, who was actually killed in World War II. In the basement of my house, I have the letters that were returned to my mother that were sent to my father. He wasn't my father, I'm sorry, her husband. But he had died, and they didn't know at the time. It's a whole box. And you say to yourself, wouldn't one beautiful letter that my mother sent to Alan, that was his name, suffice? Instead, I have hundreds. So what advice, because you've thought about this more than I, what advice would you give me? Doesn't one do the trick? And I can't bring myself to dump the box. My mother's dead, by the way. That's another issue. But how about that?
Well, you don't have to dump the box, but I think that one would suffice, or you can even archive things now. I mean, that's the difference that we have now versus, for instance, the time when my grandmother was alive. We didn't really have the capabilities to digitally transfer things.
That's like AI, though, isn't it?
Oh, here we go.
Let's go to Arlene in Plymouth.
It is so not the same.
Let's go to Arlene. By the way, I have to say, I'm not doing this because Andy's gone. People are still texting. They are overwhelmingly with you on this AIR thing. Arlene, you're in Plymouth. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. What's up?
Hi. I have a chair from my grandmother that I saved for 50 years. It was in the attic, and the back is caned, and the cane was off. I had one little piece and the center, and it was upholstered, but it was the seat, but it was falling apart. And I finally said to myself, I love this chair. I want to keep it. So I had it refinished, recaned, and reupholstered, and it's gorgeous.
I think that's
happy.
That's like a new chair, essentially, with old memories. That's great. That doesn't run afoul of anything, does? Are you happy? You're happy, right?
Oh, I'm happy. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a lot of other crap that you're holding on to, or just the chair? Exactly. I knew that was it. Arlene, thank you. Well, it's not an evil laugh from Arlene. But by the way, that's a wonderful thing to do. If you have something that matters to you and it's getting old and crummy, then have it re-something, whatever the verb is, and make it like new but old, if you know what I'm talking about.
And I think that's the other great thing about not having a lot is then you can you'll see that chair, you'll see it among everything else a lot more easily and connect with it.
Do you are you like at the sickness stage when it comes to, I'm looking at you. It sounds like
I am dying to get over to your house. You have no idea.
I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of stuff. By the way, don't you think, I have 2 kids now, 28 and 30. You don't think it was important to save every single work of art they've ever done in their whole elementary school life?
Oh, I thought you were going to save everything that you've done that goes to the Jim Braude Museum. We have to clear, for everybody here at the library, we have to clear off Jim's desk at the end of the day, and it all goes to the Jim Braude Archives and Library.
By the way, there would not be enough room at the Boston Public Library. Eric in Bedford, hi.
Hello. First of all, thank you all for what you do so much.
You're very nice.
You do an awesome job.
What's up?
And it's really nice to hear Jared on, Miss Marjorie, but the two of you work very well together. I was going to say something about, you were saying junk and clutter. I believe everybody should get junk and clutter out of their lives, but I decorate with more of a sentimental value, things of art, that kind of stuff, and it's quite full. But I structure it in a way that it's almost, I like to think of it as a sculpture, or people, I had a best friend talk about like walking through a museum kind of thing. But I was blown away, Jim, by your story about the letters with your mom and her first husband in World War I. And I just, as a suggestion, that just sounds gorgeous, and what a great conversation piece for people that visit your place. I was thinking perhaps one that's not too personal to be framed beautifully on the wall or something, and then underneath that like a footlocker from World War I with everything in there, so that, think of just the mystery of what's in the trunk as you walk by it, or things like that. So I'm a huge fan of finding special things and just displaying them nicely and doing a lot of it.
Well, Eric, you should come to my house instead of Jared. That actually is, that's a beautiful idea. It was World War II, by the way, but that's a great idea. Eric,
World War
thank
II,
you.
sorry.
No, don't apologize. It was great. Thank you. Mackenzie, one of our colleagues, writes, I have a collection of stuff I've found in used books. Plane tickets, receipts for bounce checks from the 70s, handwritten notes. We'll never get rid of them. What's your response to Mackenzie?
But the point is, it's meaningful to her.
Mackenzie,
by the way,
can you write another note and tell us why it's meaningful to you that you have receipts from bounce checks from the 1970s?
I was going to say, by the way, I have a couple of things of my grandmother's.
You do?
Because I know how important they were to her, so they're important to me. And hopefully anything that I have will get people around me, younger generations will understand the value, and it gets passed on that way, hopefully.
Okay. Marshall in Roxbury, you're next. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent.
So I think that any kind of art has to be wall-worthy. You know what I mean? It's like
I
I
like
have a spot for my wall, and it has to meet that certain criteria. And then if I have something that's big, like a big chair or a big saw, something that's that big has to leave if I buy it.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. Actually, that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
One in, one out. I love that. Do you do that in practice or just in theory, Marshall?
I do it in practice, except I have a couple of friends who keep giving me things in theory.
Marshall, that's a great call. Thank you. That's actually a great way to live.
I do that with clothes.
What?
I do that with clothes.
You really do?
Yep.
This is rather anal, you know that? I mean, this is odd, don't you think?
I do not think it's odd.
Wait a second. You buy a jacket. You have really nice clothes, by the way. You buy a jacket and you get rid of a jacket?
I do. I just made a trip to Goodwill the other day. I delivered 5 shirts to Goodwill because I had bought some new shirts.
That's really unbelievable. We have time for one more. 877-301-8970. I can't believe you really inspired a generation with your debate there with Andy Ihnatko about what is art and what is not. Joel, you're going to finish things up and then we move to music. Joel in a car, welcome. Hi.
Hi, Joel.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I am literally in my truck coming from a home that my brother has a business cleaning out.
Great.
Estate sales, divorce sales, moving sales. I've got a truck full of Christmas ornaments I'm bringing to a church who's having a Christmas in July bazaar tomorrow.
That's great.
The amount of stuff we throw away that people have no interest in anymore, the personal mementos, it's incredible.
Well, it's also great. Like you said, you went to Goodwill. You're putting all this stuff that somebody doesn't use or need anymore to good use. Joel, good for you. Thank you for your call. So what's the conclusion, do you think?
The conclusion is I know when you're on vacation because I fill in for you. So that's when I'll go over to your house.
Yeah.
It'll be all beautiful when you come back.
I bet it will.
All right. That's
Do
all.
my desk at GBH first, would you please?
I'm not going anywhere near that.
Okay.
That is all the time we have for that conversation. Live music is back next with players from this weekend's Fenway Porch Festival. Don't go away. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Is life.
There's nothing more fundamental than the access to clean drinking water. If you don't have that, you really don't have much else.
So why and how are people supposed to survive without it? We're taking a deep dive into water to find out. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the South Shore Irish Heritage Trail. You can travel into the past through 9 towns in Plymouth County. Learn more at ssirishtrail.org, funded by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. And American Repertory Theater, presenting 1776. The revival of the Tony Award-winning Best Musical follows the Founding Fathers' pursuit of freedom and the compromises made to get there. Closing July 24th. amrep.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Marjorie's on vacation. She's back Monday. Jared Bowen has been beautifully sitting in all week. This week, by the way, I don't know when we started this, a couple of months ago, doing music, but it really like starts my weekend in a way that is just otherworldly great. We'll continue today. Tomorrow, close to 100 musicians will take to stages throughout Boston's Fenway neighborhood for their annual Fenway Porch Fest music festival. We're joined now by Marie Fukuda. Marie, it's good to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. Who's orchestrating the whole deal. And Red Shades, brilliant rapper, community leader, artistic powerhouse who performed here a couple of weeks ago. You were huge, and we got great feedback on you. Who's curating her own show within the Porch Fest by the Landmark Center. We also have 3 great performers. We'll introduce them to you in a couple of minutes. But first, great to see you two. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.
So honored to be back again.
Oh, my God.
So to give us a preview, other than the musical preview we're about to hear, what is Fenway Porch Fest? What can people experience this weekend?
Sure. So Fenway Porch Fest is a one-day free music event happening over more than 30 different porches with 80-plus musicians. You can see acts from everywhere, from the School of the Museum of Fine Arts to the Verb Hotel, all parks in between, all different types of music.
And that's, by the way, one of the things that separate. We've done a lot of Porch Fest things here. What seems to separate what you all are doing is the fact that it's all over the place. It's not 1 or 2. It's really all over the community, right?
I'd say that, and I'd also say the thing that really makes us unique is that we don't have porches. So.
Exactly. It is called the Porch Fest. You know that, but I just want to be clear. Is that correct?
It's called Music Everywhere, Porch is Optional. That's our tagline.
Is that really what it is?
Yep.
Oh, I love that. So Red Shades, you've got a piece of the action here at the Landmark Center, yes?
Yes, I do.
What are you doing?
So I was called upon to curate a complete entire event and show at 401 Park Drive, but I have been partnered with Fenway Porch Fest since its inception in 2018.
It's not on porches. I want you to know that.
And it wasn't on a porch.
Okay,
it was in front of a restaurant, and my very first one. And I just kept a relationship, and we continued to build one even through the pandemic. And then they hit me up this year like, "Hey, we actually want you to curate one of our new sites." And here I am with the Aura takeover. So
I think it's terrific. We're going to talk more. We're going to tell people how to find the locations and all that sort of thing. Marie, do you want to introduce us? Tell us the name of our first performer.
First performer's name is, is it Joby?
Job
I'm
Freeman.
sorry, Job Freeman's going to be joining us. Yeah,
well,
Job.
Let's talk to. Hey, Job, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for the invite, Jim. I appreciate it, and Jared too.
Our pleasure. So, what's your deal? What's your deal?
I like to do topical portraits of people based on conversations. Maybe sometimes doing a deep dive into historical characters or people that maybe I think Jared would appreciate this. That maybe I meet at a pub, and it is the antithesis, I would think, of an AI production.
That'll stay with us. Low folk is a term I read in a bio of you. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I love folk music. Big fan, of course, of Morphine. And this is, I'm playing more of an acoustic guitar-style bass, so it has a lot lower register.
I see. What are you playing for people here?
This is a song called Tommy's Getting Buried and Born, and it was written in a pub, and we were having a conversation one day, me and a couple of regulars, and what are we going to do with our end-of-life plans? And Tommy, who actually was a Vietnam vet, said, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to get buried in Bourne. But it's Bourne, Massachusetts, Bourne, and they have a national cemetery there. And honestly, Jim, I got tapped on the shoulder by a voice of Willie Nelson, and he said, son, if you don't use that line in a song, you got to give it to somebody else.
So you used it. Job Freeman, here he is.
Tommy's Getting Buried and Born. Let's go waltzing. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3. Tommy's getting buried and born. I read it in the paper last Sunday morning. Yep, that a lot of vets I read. He'd sit for hours just listening to the stories, the edge of the bed. There's some kinds of memories you can't medicate away. Hey. Tommy's getting buried and born. Yeah, maybe that's why he talks so freaking loud. at the end of the bar every night. Tommy's getting buried in Bourne. He worked at the post office just down the street. For 26 years he walked the same banal beat. That's where a lot of our boys went after the war. Yeah, POWMIA, that's who that black and white flag flies there for. Yeah, maybe that's why he talks so freaking loud at the end of the bar every night. Tommy's getting buried in Bourne. Big chord, hold on. Tommy's getting buried in Bourne. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you, Willie Nelson and Joe Freeman. Joe, that was great. Thank you so much for being with us.
Joe, can I ask
Of course.
a quick
Joe,
question?
stay
Because
there.
I am so obsessed with process. You get that kernel, and then what is your process to develop a story like that?
Write it down. ASAP
Yep.
on wherever,
He's pointing to
wherever
his
you
hand.
can.
Yeah.
And then and just stay with it. The inspiration is a wonderful thing, but you do need to roll up your sleeves with the whole editing process. That's a whole nother game.
Joe, thanks. That was great.
Fantastic.
It was really great.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Joe.
much for being here. So in a minute, you're going to tell us, this is for you, Marie, where all the locations are. What if somebody wants to find Joe? Do they have the ability to do that, or is that a little bit too whatever? How do they do that?
Yeah, they sure do have the ability. Anyone can go to fenwayporchfest.org. The map and performers are up on the schedule. There's two ways to look up what's happening. One is by looking at the musicians and clicking on them. The next is to look at the map. Yeah.
How'd this come about? Not this one, but how'd this start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a great arts advocate posed a question to our organization. Our organizations are Fenway Civic, Fenway Alliance, and Fenway Community Development Corporation about what's missing and what is it that you can do together that you can't do alone. And we really looked at how the neighborhood didn't have any community arts festivals. We didn't have open studios. And we thought Porch Fest would be great. Mindy Freed from JP Porch Fest was a great advocate of bringing community together through the arts and promoting artists, and that's what we wanted to do.
That's great.
So, Red, I would imagine that there's this magic here. First, people finding you hear this, and they make an appointment to do this weekend, and then people just walking down the street who find you. What is that like as a performer to kind of have this organic performance happen?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love Fenway Porch Fest in particular. In 2019, I remember I performed right in front of the harp. And at first, there were like about 5 people there. And, we're audible like throughout the whole neighborhood so people could hear us. And my friends actually that didn't plan on coming, they were like grocery shopping and they heard me and they walked over. And before you knew it, the whole street was flooded with just like passerbys, like passer goers, like, oh, what's going on? Like, because a lot of people didn't even know this was a thing. And like Marie said, it wasn't on an actual porch. So they were like, why are they just performing in the street? But this is awesome music. So it's great. You get new fans, you meet curators, volunteers. So it's just a great opportunity.
Plus, the weather is going to be spectacular, so I'm sure everybody's nervous about that in advance. Let's go to performer number 2. If I say your name is Mar Fios, how close am I going to be?
Super close.
No, well, how close was I really?
Like really close.
Like really close?
Like really good.
Well, you are Mar Fios. You're with Jose. Introduce Jose to us. You're a pianist. You're a accompanist.
Yeah, Jose is one of my best friends. And we have been playing together a lot lately. And he's an amazing musician, also like Berkeley grad. We graduated from the same master's program at Berkeley. And
you're from Barcelona, no?
I am from Barcelona, and he is from Costa Rica.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how'd you end up here? Well, by the way, Jose does not have a mic, or I'd asked him too. But Mar, how did you end up? How'd you end up in Boston?
Because I came to do my undergrad at Berkeley.
Oh, you did?
And that happened like 6 years ago. And then I just did the undergrad, then I worked for a while. Then I did my master's, and then now I'm a faculty at Berkeley, and I'm like gigging around.
Oh, that's great. How'd you get involved with the Fenway Porch Fest with no porches?
Actually, it was Berkeley that told me about it. They sent me an email like, I think that you would be a perfect sort of like candidate if you are interested in doing it. It's going to be so much fun. We would like you to go. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to apply. And yeah, we are here today.
What are you performing today?
I am performing one of my originals. This is part of my first album. It's in Spanish, and the album is called Mi Propia Religión. I published that in 2020. And we are going to do this song that is called Puzzles sin Abrir, that basically talks about a breakup and how you are like losing a person that matters a lot to you, and how you feel that you are not, in a way, incomplete, but there's something that is missing. It's like you are a closed puzzle. This is the meaning.
Wonderful. Mar and Jose, take it away.
Thank you.
Y ni sabes por qué. Y ahora vas y te alejas, aunque en el fondo sé que eso que sentimos no se esfuma sin más, y que eso que vivimos no se olvida jamás, porque tú te colaste hasta ser parte de mí. Sin ti algo falta, soy un puzzle sin abrir. Y ahora voy y te espero y no entiendo el porqué. Y ahora voy y me acuerdo, aunque en el fondo sé que con otra adormeces los recuerdos que te di. Y aunque aún no lo entiendas, formo parte de ti, porque tú te colaste hasta ser parte de mí. Sin ti algo falta, soy un puzzle
Bios, Jose, it was beautiful. Thank you both.
That was a song about a breakup. Are you writing what you know? And if you are, what is it like to put a piece of you out publicly like that?
I want to be like very honest. It was really hard for me to put this song out there because I felt that I was kind of like shouting to the world something that was very private to me. But after a while, I was like, that is what music is about. Like, we need to do music that is authentic, and this is our way to express ourselves, and a lot of people may relate to that, and that's going to be
That's why I
probably
don't do
useful for
music.
them.
I don't want to tell anybody anything. You guys were fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, that is unbelievable. And there are how many artists? We've heard 2. How many artists performing at all the venues, Marie?
So there's more than 80 artists, and I think the thing I just want to tack on to is that it's really the artists that are making this event. It's not about the organizers, and hearing this music today and this great talent. Red was one of the artists that I came onto my radar in 2016, and I was so happy when she joined us the first year. It's about them.
Speaking of happy, look at you. You 2 are the happiest people I've seen in months. Are you not nervous about this thing, Red?
No, I'm honored, actually. I'm excited, and I can't believe that, the relationship turned into what it's become. I had no idea I'd be, doing something of this magnitude.
Why does this matter? I mean, it's huge fun, obviously,
Yeah.
just standing here and listening to these incredible artists, and there's another to go in a second. It's so huge, particularly at a time like this when everybody's so miserable about so many things. Why does this matter in the grand scheme of things, Red Shades?
Because it embodies and it gets to show what community really is. It pushes a lot of artists to the forefront who otherwise wouldn't get an opportunity. Just think of how many people are going to discover so many new artists tomorrow in a really great part of the city, because Fenway, like, everybody's always there, and it's going to be hot out tomorrow. So I just think it's a great opportunity.
And how many artists did you say? About 80 artists?
About 80, yeah.
So you hear every manner of music, I would imagine, every manner of performance. I mean, what's the range? How do you describe the range of what people experience?
We've got everything from hip hop, jazz, hyper pop, neo funk, soul. We have a classical string orchestra and a petting zoo. We even have a youth circus troupe performing at Evans Way.
Of course you do.
Oh,
Why
I
wouldn't
love
you?
that.
Now, are you holding those T-shirts because they're going to give them to us, or what are you doing here?
I'm giving them
with
to
it.
you, but I'm also saying this is a way to find out what's
Hold it
happening
up.
on the ground.
Right, there it is.
There will
Okay.
be volunteers wearing these bright yellow T-shirts, and they'll have brochures. They'll tell you what's happening where, and that's about it.
You don't think you're misrepresenting by calling it Fenway Porch Fest? I mean, I'm obsessed with this now. No? No? Yes, you are. Okay, fine. I'll take my T-shirt. Thank you very much. Now, Red Shades,
Yes.
the final performer, I believe, is from your venue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Who are we going to hear?
We are going to hear International Show.
But he goes by show, is what I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, when you get to know him, he goes by show. He does a lot
Do
of
I
things.
know you
He's a
well
show.
enough to call you show or not?
Yes, you do.
I do?
Yeah.
We just met like an hour ago.
I know we just met, but we feel like family. It feels
We
like
do,
we're family.
actually. Speaking of, the prior performer is from Barcelona. You lived in Russia for a while? Is that what it is?
Yeah, actually, for the course of on and off for 3 years. Yeah.
What were you doing there?
I was doing music. I got signed to this independent label called Out Label, and they had me doing a lot of recording, songwriting, production, mixing, and mastering.
So you know what we'll do? Here's the compromise. I'm going to call you International Show.
Right.
And then if you're good, I'll start calling you Show. Is that a deal?
Cool. That's the deal.
What are you performing for us?
I am going to be performing one of my singles called You'll Save Me. And I'm a Christian rap artist as well, hip-hop artist. And this story just really goes to something, a personal traumatic time in my life where I got into a car accident. And I ended up climbing this guardrail to get out of the way I was on the highway. And I thought there was some standing room on the other side of the guardrail, and there wasn't, and I fell 15 feet. And God just provided shelter. He provided care. And I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't hurt or anything like that. Obviously sore. And I was in, a brace for a little bit, but if it wasn't for the grace of God, I wouldn't be here today. So this is what this story is about.
International Show. We're really excited to hear you perform.
Thank you.
We're seconds away here. Just a second.
lost in the road with nowhere to go. The only one I know to call on is you, 'cause Lord, you'll save me. You'll save me. Light in my path, yeah, I ain't even gotta ask. The reason why I do it fast, so you can cleanse all the bad. What I've been through these past years, to took the wheel, you shift the gears. Would've never made it without you, I can never make it without. Pick me up out the darkness, it's literal, it's not a metaphor. I know your angels had a part in this, that's what my mama been praying for. Could've been so paralyzed, could've been dead in the ditch. Everywhere I'ma tell my story, look at what my God has did. Give me a second chance to go live this life. That's another chance to go get it right. I can hear you telling me it's alright. I just wanna thank you, Lord, hands to the sky, yeah. Lost in the road with nowhere to go. The only one I know to call on is you, 'cause Lord, you'll save me. 'Cause Lord, you'll save me. I'm lost in the road with nowhere to go. The only one I know to call on is you, 'cause Lord, you'll save me. You'll save me. You'll save me. 'Cause you're there when I fall, you'll save me. You know how it feels to sleep with a mask on, 'cause you can't breathe in your sleep, Lord, thanks for making my back strong. When I fell 15 feet, every day could be my last, falling asleep at the wheel. My mind telling me to pull over, but I keep fighting my will like it's only 20 minutes, I can make it. Wait to my destination, doing 85, feeling like I'm racing. Told mama good night, I'll call you later. Didn't know that later may not come. My God, I was about to leave my son, no. Give me a second chance to go live this life. That's another chance to go get it right. I can hear you telling me it's alright. I just wanna thank you, Lord, hands to the sky, yeah. Lost in the road with nowhere to go. The only one I know to call on is you, 'cause Lord, you'll save me. You'll save me. You'll save me. 'Cause you're there when I fall. You'll save me. You'll pick me up out the dark.
International show. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Wow. And there's 77 more? Is that I mean, this is really...
There might be a little over that because I'm bringing a lot.
I bet you are. We got to thank you both. We really appreciate it. Marie Fukuda, Red Shades, thank you so much. And again, it's fenwayporchfest.org to get all the information you need. It's great to see you both. Good luck this weekend. Jared, quickly, what are you doing on Open Studio?
We'll talk to Boston's man of murals, one of my favorite people in the city, Rob Pro-Black-Gibbs.
Great.
If you go down to the Greenway, you see a giant mural. That's Rob's. We talked to him all about that mural. I speak with the contemporary artist Leslie Dill, who looks at some of America's visionary spirits in her newest exhibition, and an author who is author and illustrator and painter who is profoundly influenced by Maurice Sendak. That would be Oliver Jeffers. So it's a great threesome on the show tonight.
Okay, we don't have time to thank all the people as we do in every show, but we've got to particularly thank the on-site engineers of the BPL, Sai Patel, Cullen Cockrell, Rob Fagnan, who I think now is back in Brighton, without whom this beautiful sound and the pictures you saw today couldn't happen. Congratulations to you two. If these three are any indication, Fenway Porch Fest is going to be great. Hope it's terrific. Jared, you've been absolutely wonderful this week. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you all for coming. Marjorie is back on Monday. Have a wonderful and safe weekend. And don't forget the Fenway Porch Fest. See you then. Bye.